Chapter 478. The next day Yu Shu went to the Taisha library for a class again. Fang Zijing's Qimen Dun Jia was on the first chapter. She had benefited a lot from it. She had prepared a pen and paper for the lecture. She was listening and taking notes at the same time. She had the spirit of studying in her previous life, which attracted Fang Zijing's attention. After class, Mr. Fang beckoned for her to come over. He took the notebook that she had taken notes in class and flipped through it. When he handed it back, he said, "Not bad." As a result, all the students present heard it and began to take notes in the next lecture. Gradually, it became a learning style. "I heard that you raised a few strings of stones?" Fang Zijing asked Yu Shu. Yu Shu didn't expect that even he had heard about it. She took off the topaz in her hand. Fang Zijing pinched it with 2 fingers and looked a little surprised. His eyes were so sharp that he found the beauty and shortcomings of the topaz in his hand. He frowned and said, "It's good at first, but it's opportunistic. After a long time, it will lose its spirituality and need to be raised repeatedly." Yu Shu touched her nose. She also knew that the crystal bracelet had to be put back in her feng shui pool to be purified after a period of time. She wanted to take advantage of this and do some after-sales service. Now that Fang Zijing pointed it out, it was a little boring. Fang Zijing snorted and gave the bracelet to her. He said, "Get one for me later." Yu Shu was stunned. Fang Zijing snorted. He could tell that she was being stingy and he was unhappy. Looking at her eyes, it was as if he was a thick-skinned old man. Who knew how many people were fighting to curry favor with him? Wasn't it because he liked Qinglan? Otherwise, why would he want this girl's plaything? He didn't expect that Yu Shu would say, "Academician, do you want it for situ?" "That's not necessary. I originally wanted to give her one, but I haven't raised it yet. I will give it to her in a few days." Fang Zijing suddenly felt that he was measuring the heart of a gentleman with his own mean measure. He waved his hand expressionlessly and let her go. Situ Qinglan was waiting for Yu Shu outside the Zushuatang. She didn't know that her grandfather was helping her to get something. When she saw Yu Shu, they went to hide together. Situ Qinglan told her about the gossip she heard recently. The Imperial Astronomer's document has been issued. Zhan Shuiyuan can only take office after the examination. Some people have seen her pestering Academician Jing with questions these 2 days. It's obvious that she has an ulterior motive. Many people are waiting to see her make a fool of herself by drawing lots. If she fails the examination in the end and loses the position that she has won, it will be ridiculous. Yu Shu furrowed her brows. She didn't know why this Jing Chen was always at odds with her. Every single time he would get involved with someone she couldn't get along with. Last time it was Ji Xingxuan. This time it was Zhan Shuiyuan. Then she thought of the jar of tiger bones that was sent to her house a few days ago. She felt that there was something fishy about it. "But why does it sound like you have a grudge against Zhan Shuiyuan?" Yu Shu turned her head and looked at her with a faint smile. She asked directly. Situ Qinglan was a little embarrassed and sneered, "It's because she likes to stir up trouble behind people's backs. It's okay for people like me to talk about it. But she doesn't care about her words. Before you went to worship the ancestors, I saw her and others talking about me behind my back. She said I was shameless." Yu Shu immediately understood. She knew that Situ Qinglan didn't use her as a tool. Her face became better again. She rolled her eyes and said, "I also don't like her. Should we teach her a lesson?" Situ Qinglan hesitated. "How? Are we going to quarrel with her face to face? That would be a joke." "Quarrel is nothing. It doesn't hurt." Yu Shu shook her head. "It depends on whether you are afraid of offending her or not. I don't care. We already quarreled in Huajin Garden." Situ Qinglan didn't want to act on impulse. "It's okay. It's okay if you don't want to." Yu Shu patted her on the shoulder. She didn't want to force her. Then she changed the topic in case she felt embarrassed. In fact, if she wanted to teach Zhan Shuiyuan a lesson, it didn't matter if she brought Situ Qinglan or not. She just wanted to find a chance to go through thick and thin with her so that they could get along better in the future. As the 2 of them chatted, they arrived at the Philosopher's Tower where the predecessor's personal letters and rare books were kept. As soon as they entered, Yu Shu noticed that the atmosphere inside was a little off. It was mainly because she saw a few people walking to and fro outside the row of bookshelves in front. They were obviously not looking for books, but seemed to be watching a show instead. Situ Qinglan said to Yu Shu, "Let's go and have a look." "Okay." As they walked over, they found out what those people were peeping at. In the aisle between the 2 rows of bookshelves, sunlight shone in from the east window. Jing Chen raised one arm and slowly rummaged through the bookshelves. A pretty girl in a pink dress stood beside him, holding a half-opened book in her hand. She looked up and asked, her eyes full of longing and her cheeks slightly red. Academician Jing, among the 64 hexagrams, why is the gene hexagram in the astrological position? Jing Chen didn't look back at the girl but answered seriously, this is a strange hexagram. There are no stars to represent it. Kun is below, Li is above. The sun and the earth are connected, so it is good for people's luck. Seeing this, Situ Qinglan curled her lips and turned around to mock Yushu. But she saw that Yushu was looking at the two people in front of her indifferently. Feeling bored, she pulled Yushu and whispered, Lotus Room, let's go upstairs. On the other side, Jing Chen's ears moved. He turned his face and saw a pair of silent eyes. His heart stopped for a moment and he couldn't look away. Zhan Shuiyuan found something wrong with Jing Chen, so she followed his eyes and turned around. At a glance, she saw the tall Yushu standing a few feet away. Her face stiffened at first, but then she thought of the change of identity, so she raised her chin and threw away the trace of timidity. Yushuanzi, long time no see. How are you? Looking at Zhan Shuiyuan's behavior, Yushu knew that she didn't learn from her mistakes. She thought that once she became the Celestial Commissioner, she would have someone to support her. After being instigated by Cui Yun, she dared to confuse right and wrong and slander her. Now seeing her, she was actually not afraid. I'm good, but not as good as Miss Zhan. I heard that you filled the vacancy of the Celestial Commissioner. Do I have to call you milord? There was no fierceness on Yushu's face. She said with a sigh, as if she was a little envious, but also as if she didn't remember the unhappy things that happened in Huajin Garden. Zhan Shuiyuan smiled, and her eyes flashed with pride. She became more courageous, shook the scroll in her hand and pretended to be modest. You're flattering me. I still have to pass the assessment to be the official position. It's not too late for you to change the way you address me after you take up the position. Then she paused, raised her voice and laughed. Hee hee, you won't believe it. I was surprised on the day I received the document. If I knew that the Celestial Commissioner would choose one of the candidates for the ancestral worship this time, and Swansea is more outstanding than us in Huajin Garden. Moreover, she's a female Swansea who doesn't appear in 10 years. I thought this position would belong to you. Who knew that the Celestial Commissioner has a different vision and chose me in the end? I'm really sorry. Although she said sorry, her face was obviously full of sarcasm, and her words were even more sarcastic, which attracted the attention of several people who were not far away. Situ Qinglan frowned and looked at Yushu worriedly. But she saw that the corner of Yushu's mouth slowly curved up, which made Situ Qinglan's heart skip a beat. The next moment, Yushu moved and walked forward with big steps. Slap. No one was prepared, and she slapped Zhan Shuiyuan's face loudly. Situ Qinglan, who was standing behind Yushu, was stunned, and so was Jing Chen, who was standing behind Zhan Shuiyuan. Some people who were watching the scene were also stunned. Zhan Shuiyuan's face was burning. She screamed and covered her face. She stared at Yushu with her eyes wide open, and her eyes were full of disbelief. She actually slapped her. In front of these people, in front of Academician Jing. Let me teach you a lesson. If you see me in the future, stay away from me. Zhan Shuiyuan took a deep breath, and her eyes instantly turned red. She screamed angrily, you bitch, slap. Before she could say anything, Yushu raised her hand and slapped her on the other side of the face, which made everyone dumbfounded. Zhan Shuiyuan's heart was beating like thunder. Seeing Yushu put up 3 fingers in front of her, no one knew what she was thinking, but when she looked at Yushu again, she looked like a Rakshasa who was asking for a debt, and her face became horrible. She shivered and took half a step back. She was full of humiliation and fear and didn't dare to speak again. Seeing Zhan Shuiyuan being slapped by Yushu, Situ Qinglan felt happy at first, but then she was worried about how Yushu would deal with it. At this moment, she saw Zhan Shuiyuan holding her rapidly red and swollen cheek, choking. She lowered her head and ran away from Yushu. She pushed away several people in the aisle and ran away crying without looking back. Yushu gently shook her numb palm and looked up to meet Jing Chen's confused and disapproving eyes. It was like a similar scene in her memory. She immediately sneered and turned to leave. However, when she took a step forward, her arm was grabbed by him. Little? Seeing Yushu's cold face, Jing Chen couldn't call her little fish. He felt bitter in his chest and whispered, "She was wrong to mock you, but you didn't have to hit her." It had been a long time since they parted, and this was the first time Jing Chen had spoken to her directly. Yushu no longer felt sad but only felt that it was ridiculous. She had forgotten when this person in front of her, who was so familiar to the point of being a stranger, had become like this. He could be soft-hearted to anyone but her. His heart was as hard as iron. She didn't want to explain more to him. She raised her eyebrows arrogantly and said coldly, "Academician Jing, don't you know the rules of the Taisha Library? I am a 4th-class female mathematician, and she is a 9th-class teacher, but she doesn't respect me. Shouldn't I teach her a lesson?" After that, without waiting for his reply, she pushed his hand away and walked out. Situ Qinglan hurriedly followed. She looked back and saw Academician Jing watching them leave in the light and shadow under the window. He seemed to be covered with a layer of loneliness. When they left, the onlookers also left. Jing Qin stood there for a long time before he sighed softly. He knew that she often came here. He had no class today, but he also came to the Taisha Library and waited here. They finally met and parted on bad terms. Chapter 479. Situ Qinglan followed Yushu out of the hiding place. She followed Yushu's fast footsteps all the way down the corridor. Then she noticed that Yushu slowed down. "Lotus Room, are you okay?" Situ Qinglan looked at Yushu's slightly gloomy side face and asked cautiously. Yushu shook her head. She was lost in thought. Then she calmed down and turned to Situ Qinglan saying, "How was it? Was the 2 slaps enough to vent your anger?" Situ Qinglan remembered how Zhan Shuiyuan covered his face and cried away. She pursed her lips and smiled. Looking at Yushu, her eyes lit up. She nodded and asked curiously, "I was wondering why she didn't even dare to fight back when you slapped her like that." As far as she knew, Zhan Shuiyuan was a domineering person. How could she become a punching bag in front of Yushu? Wasn't she quite arrogant at the beginning? Yushu chuckled and told her about the bet between them in Huajin Garden. Zhan Shuiyuan and Cui Yun had slapped her 10 times equally. Situ Qinglan suddenly understood. Then she felt that Zhan Shuiyuan was not smart enough. With such a weakness in Yushu's hand, she still dared to be so arrogant in front of Zhan Shuiyuan. Wasn't she asking for a beating? "But you slapped her face in front of these people today. She must be resentful. What if she takes revenge on you in the future? You know, she is going to be an official of the Celestial Commissioner soon. She has more power than us for no reason. It's inevitable that she will be arrogant." Yushu turned her head and glanced at her. "Am I afraid?" Situ Qinglan was stunned. Looking at her indifferent face, she immediately remembered one thing. The woman in front of her had once defeated several outstanding disciples of Academician Han. She dared to snatch the seal of Academician Han and scolded him in public. She didn't even give face to Han Wenguang. Why would she be afraid of Zhan Shuyan? "If you feel that you have vented your anger, do me a favor." Yushu patted her on the shoulder and didn't care that passers-by heard it. "I will tell you how Zhan Shuiyuan and Cui Yun owe me 10 slaps. You spread the news so that people will know that I didn't slap her face for nothing. Is that okay?" Situ Qinglan was still a little scared. She hesitated for a moment and agreed, "It's not difficult. I will help you." Yushu smiled but didn't thank her. The 2 of them left the inner courtyard together, tacitly not mentioning what had happened in the treasury. As soon as Yushu sat in the carriage, her face darkened. When Jing Qin sent someone to deliver the tiger bones that day, she was already suspicious. Today, when she met Jing Qin in the Tower of Philosophers, if she still couldn't sense that something was amiss, then she would have grown a brain for nothing. Just before the worship ceremony, Jing Qin, who had turned a blind eye to her in Rongxing Hall, suddenly changed his attitude and approached her intentionally or unintentionally. Why? After thinking about it, she could only come up with one plausible explanation. The person who had broken the order had been found. In that case, the reason why Jing Qin approached her again was because his destiny was broken, so he had no worries and was not afraid that his so-called Taoist heart would be shaken? No, that's not right. If that's the case, with his temperament, if he wanted to reconcile with me, he should have directly told me about Piming. Why did he have to give up what's close at hand and seek what's far away, using that tiger bone to please me? This was strange. Since he didn't break his life, why would he dare to provoke her? Wasn't he afraid that he would fall in love with her again and implicate the people of Mount Longhu? Or did he have another purpose for doing this? Yushu's face darkened more and more and her thoughts stagnated. She couldn't figure it out for a moment, and faintly felt that something was wrong. So, she took out the Luyao coin from her waist, calmed her mind, threw it on the tea table and made a hexagram. She muttered some words and tried to solve the problem, but unexpectedly, both times were empty hexagram. It was a pity that her 8 characters and Piming didn't match, so she couldn't find any clues. Yushu patted her knees again and again. In this hot and dry weather, it was easy to feel bored. When she thought that Jing Qin might have another purpose for approaching her again, Even the coolness of the crystal on her wrist couldn't dispel the inexplicable anxiety in her. The person who had gone through thick and thin with her, who had been through life and death with her, now made her suspicious and vigilant. Was there anything worse than this? Lu Zhong go to the Supreme Court. She wanted to see Shui Rui. Now, even if she couldn't tell him, at least let her know that there was someone she could trust. There were guards on the street in front of the Supreme Court during the day. Only the carriages of officials could pass. Yushu got off at the street and walked to the gate of the government office. She was a little impulsive when she came here. When she walked to the gate and looked at the quiet government office in front of her, she hesitated. It was early in the morning and Shui Rui was working. If she came here rashly, would it affect his work? Because of this hesitation, she stood on the opposite side of the street for a long time. Just when she was about to retreat and turn around to leave, she heard a call. "Hey, Lotus House." Yushu heard the sound and looked to the west. She saw someone riding a military horse not far away. He turned over and waved to her. "Are you looking for Brother Rui? Why don't you go in?" Feng Zhaomiao was surprised to see Yushu here. He grinned at her and tied the horse to a tree on the side of the road. Being caught, Yushu was a little uncomfortable. She looked at Feng Zhaomiao, who was wearing 2 pieces of light armor and dressed like an officer. He was a little tanned and looked more energetic than before. She said, "Have you entered the military office?" "Yes, my father transferred me to the Donglin camp to suffer. I came to ask Brother Rui to do something. Look at the hot weather. Why are you standing outside? Let's go in and cool down." Feng Zhaomiao tied the horse, wiped the sweat on his forehead, and gestured for her to go in with him. Yushu no longer hesitated. They entered the Supreme Court office together. Several guards with knives in front of the door seemed to recognize Feng Zhaomiao and did not stop them. "Brother Rui said that you went to worship the ancestors this time. How was it? Was it fun?" Feng Zhaomiao and Yushu were not strangers. They had a lot to talk about when they met. "What fun. I shouldn't have gone. The person who was originally chosen sprained his ankle, so I went to make up the number." Yushu told him the inside story indifferently. She asked curiously, "Do you know what Brother Shui has been busy with recently? I haven't seen him in the days since he came back." "Oh, I heard that the Emperor decreed to change the law. Brother Rui was assigned to lead the people to tidy up the Supreme Court. I came to see him the day before yesterday and saw that he was very busy." "Haha, being a civil official is not much easier than being a military general," Feng Zhaomiao gloated. Yushu did not think it was funny. Instead, she felt a little guilty. She had never asked about Shui Rui's affairs, but now even Feng Zhaomiao knew more about Shui Rui than she did. It really made her feel guilty as his lover. Did she not care about Shui Rui too much? Feng Zhaomiao did not know what Yushu was thinking. He took her into the back hall and found the registry office. As soon as Yushu entered the library, the light above her head was dim. She first felt a stuffy bookish smell hit her face. She wrinkled her nose and scanned the 4 walls. She thought that the layout was the same, but she saw that the 4 wide walls were nailed with bookshelves more than 10 feet high. There were a few wooden ladders leaning against the side. There were only a few skylights at the top of the wall to let in the light. No wonder there was such a strong smell. Such an airtight and simple environment was very different from what she had imagined. When she bypassed a few writing desks on the ground, she looked up and saw Shui Rui, who was almost buried in the piles of documents. At that time her eyes hurt. Shui Rui was currently engrossed in reading and writing, and he didn't notice that someone had entered from the outside. He wore an incomparably white inner shirt, and more than half of his collar and chest area were drenched with sweat. The official robe that he wore outside had been taken off on the back of a chair at the side. His handsome forehead was slightly flushed, and his wet hair stuck outside his ears. He looked disheveled and in a sorry state, and there was no sign of his usual meticulous demeanor. "Brother Rui," Feng Zhaomiao flexibly passed through the layers of writing desks and glanced around with dissatisfaction. She said, "Why are you alone in this damn place? Where are the others?" Shui Rui raised his head and only saw Feng Zhaomiao. He did not notice Yushu standing at the door, so he put down his pen, pulled his collar, and said, "Today is Mu Xiu. They have been rushing for a few days, so I asked them to go home and rest." "You are so diligent," Feng Zhaomiao whispered again. She seemed to remember something, turned her head and pointed behind her and said proudly, "Look who I brought here." Shui Rui heard this and looked outside. When he first saw the tall figure of Yushu, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. So, Feng Zhaomiao jumped and sat on the table next to her. She said, "When I came, I saw her standing outside the Supreme Court in the sun, so I brought her in." When Yushu heard him say this, she suddenly felt embarrassed. She coughed and walked forward. Shui Rui came back to his senses and looked down to see that he was in an indecent state. He quickly pulled the official robe on the back of the chair and stood up to put it on despite the heat. As he tidied up, he smiled embarrassedly at Yu Shu and said, "Why are you here?" Yu Shu had already walked in front of him. She looked down at the messy book list on his table and felt even more upset. "I came to see you on the way." Although Shui Rui was happy to see Yu Shu, he did not forget his business. He turned to Feng Xiaomiao and asked, "Where is the thing I asked you to investigate?" Feng Xiaomiao patted his head and took out a letter from his sleeve. He handed it to him. "Here, it's all on the list." Shui Rui paid no attention to Yu Shu as he opened up the list and scanned through it. He frowned a few times before folding it back up again, and he said to Feng Xiaomiao, who was anxiously waiting for him to speak, "Not bad, it should be these few people. You investigated very quickly." Feng Xiaomiao was obviously happy, but she pretended to not care and waved her hand. "It's a small matter." Shui Rui said, "It's hot here. Go to Wangji restaurant and have a good meal before returning to the camp. Ask Lin Fu to pick 2 jars of good wine for you to take away." Feng Xiaomiao happily agreed. Then he bid farewell to Yu Shu and left in a flash. Shui Rui sent Feng Xiaomiao away and then focused on Yu Shu. He thought that she would not come to the Supreme Court to find him for no reason, so he asked, "What happened?" Yu Shu was feeling guilty. She flipped through the book on the table and said in a muffled voice, "Can't I come to see you if I have nothing to do? Can't I miss you?" Shui Rui was stunned. His eyes turned warm. He raised his hand and pressed the back of her hand that was flipping on the table. He pinched it and said with a smile. Chapter 480. I missed you too. It was very hot inside the records office. Yu Shu's left hand that was being held by Shui Rui's sweaty hand felt hot, but it was like a cool breeze had blown into her heart, dispersing all the distractions she had on the way here. She raised her eyes and looked at Shui Rui's handsome face that was dripping with sweat. A thought flashed through her mind, and she allowed him to hold her left hand while her other hand pulled out the handkerchief from her waist. She wrapped it around her fingers and leaned over to wipe his forehead with the handkerchief across the table. "It's so hot and you can still sit here. If it was me, I would have already left." Shui Rui looked at her actions and tightened his grip on her slender hand. He gently breathed in, smelling the refreshing fragrance of the handkerchief on her fingers. He did not move as he waited for her to wipe the sweat off his face. Only then did he slowly let go of her. "I was the one who accepted this job, how can I just let it go? Don't just stand there, come and sit." Shui Rui pulled out his chair and wiped it for Yu Shu to sit down. He then went to get the teapot, wanting to pour her a cup of water. Who knew that it was empty? He did not know when the water inside had been drunk. "Wait here, I'll go outside and call someone to make tea." "I'll go, you can rest." Yu Shu stopped him and took the teapot from his hand. She looked at him up and down and blinked with a smile, saying, "If Dage is hot, you can take off your official robe to cool down. There are no outsiders here, I don't mind." With that said, he carried the teapot and strode past a few rows of desks, heading out. Shui Rui's gaze followed her as she walked further away. Only then did he lower his head to look at the sorry state he was in. He laughed involuntarily. After thinking for a moment, he took off his official robe once again and found the fan that was pressed under a few files. He leaned his waist against the side of the table and fanned himself while looking outside the door. A faint smile hung on the corners of his mouth. Not long after, Yu Shu came back with a pot of herbal tea. She saw Shui Rui's clothes. Because it was sweaty and thin, she could faintly see the smooth lines of his skin and his strong chest. She couldn't help but take a few more glances. Feeling the hot air caress her face, she pretended to be ignorant and poured some tea for him to drink. "I heard from Xiaomiao that the imperial edict ordered to change the laws. Is that why you're so busy?" Shui Rui drank 2 cups of water in a row, and his voice became much lighter. "Not only the Supreme Court, but the 6 ministries will also have to reorganize the Wenzhong, and report to the Imperial Library the inconsistencies of the previous years, so that the laws can be amended." Imperial Library? Yu Shu didn't know much about politics. Since he wanted to understand more about Shui Rui's political environment, he asked him for advice. Shui Rui told her about the Imperial Court's 1 supervisor, 2 bureaus, 3 temples and 6 ministries. At first he thought she was just curious, but when he saw her serious face, he could not help but feel strange. After he finished, he asked her, "Why do you suddenly want to know about court affairs?" Yu Shu refilled his cup of water. Seeing his concerned expression, she seemed to have made up her mind about something and said seriously, I've decided that in the future I must become an official. How can I not know about these things? I was too careless in the past. In the future you must remind me more. Shui Rui was surprised. Half a year ago he encouraged Yu Shu to participate in the Diyan examination. After that, he often brought up the matter of women becoming officials in front of her. Every time she would evade him with a nonchalant attitude, as if she did not have much desire to enter the court and become a female official. But today was the first time she expressed it in front of him. Knowing her temperament, Shui Rui knew that she wouldn't speak nonsense out of anger. Shui Rui's mind was moved. Long before the ancestral worship, he had heard that there was a 7th-ranked female official in the imperial astronomer who was going to fill in the vacancy. He had inquired about it, and it was very likely that she would be promoted from the candidates for the ancestral worship this time. Recently he was extremely busy. After he returned, he did not continue to ask about this matter. Now that he thought about it, he looked at Yu Shu's appearance. Could it be that the position was filled by someone else? There is a 7th-ranked vacancy for the Celestial Commissioner. Have you heard the discussion in the Taisha Library recently? Shui Rui asked carefully. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Yu Shu was influenced by something that made her decide to become an official. Hearing this, Yu Shu leaned against the table, supported her chin with one hand and looked up at him. Half of her mind was thinking, when did this person in front of her start to care about her? It seemed that there were few things around her that he did not know. This vacancy has been filled. Yu Shu's tone was flat, as if it had nothing to do with her. Indeed, when she heard Situ Qinglan mention this vacancy, she did not covet it. Later, when she learned that Zhan Shuiyuan picked it up, she was a little unhappy. Shui Rui thought as expected and asked again, "Who is it? Do you remember the female student who threw the stone in Huajin Garden? The Celestial Commissioner sent a document a few days ago. It is the young lady of the Zhan family in Jiangxi." Shui Rui was very surprised. How could it be her? Even if it was not Yu Shu, the Taisha Library should have other candidates. He remembered that the young lady surnamed Zhan was only a 9th-ranked teacher. There was nothing outstanding about her. The key was that she was a child of a famous family in Jiangxi. Based on this, she should not be the candidate for the Celestial Commissioner to promote. After thinking for a while, he frowned and said, "The incident in Huajin Garden, when Lord Wang and I returned to the capital, we reported it to the Celestial Commissioner. Did the Taisha Library pursue the 2 troublemakers? No one mentioned it and it was left unsettled." Yu Shu shook her head. She knew that with Shui Rui's strictness in doing things, he would not forget about the matter of Zhan Shuiyuan and Cui Yun. Then there must be someone from the Celestial Commissioner's side who suppressed it. However, Shui Rui thought more than Yu Shu. Seeing that she was confused, he did not want her to know nothing. After thinking for a while, he decided to tell her some internal affairs. It should not be like this. The Celestial Commissioner has always been exclusive. Among the 10 officials, most of them are in charge of the 12 prefectures in the capital. Even if 30% of them are outside, they cannot be in high positions, especially not from the aristocratic families outside the capital. As for the female officials, they are first promoted from the aristocratic families of the 12 prefectures, and then they are inclined to young people like you who have no background but are outstanding. That Zhan's election must have something else behind it. Yu Shu was alarmed when she heard this, and a few expressions flashed across her face. She said in a low voice, "I see. I just don't know what she relied on to enter the Taisha Library." Afraid that she would be worried, Shui Rui said, "It's okay. I will tell you after I find out." However, Yu Shu shook her head. "There is no need to be like this. Let her be. She is just a person without a brain and will not affect me." If Zhan Shuiyuan had half of the scheming of Ji Xingxuan in the past, she would have to be careful. Unfortunately, Zhan Shuiyuan did not, so there was no need for her to be suspicious. The two chatted for a while and it was almost noon. Shui Rui's manservant, Hataku, brought tea and food over. Only then did Yu Shu know that he had been staying in this enclosed restaurant from morning to night. "You should go back first. I'll go look for you after I'm done with my work in another 2 days." Even though Shui Rui wanted to make Yu Shu stay for a while longer, he didn't want her to stay in this place and suffer with him. Yu Shu saw that Hataku had brought out a lot of food, enough for 2 people. She picked up a pair of serving chopsticks and said to him, "I am also hungry. I will eat here." Shui Rui could not drive her away, so he could only eat lunch with her. After the meal, Hataku picked up the bowls and chopsticks and left. Yu Shu touched here and there, but she did not have the intention to leave. At this moment, Shui Rui was not aware of her thoughts. He was very happy in his heart. It was not easy to see her, and he was reluctant to let her leave. He was selfish for once and went back to the table to sit down. He called out to her, "Ah Shu, come over and help me grind the ink." Yu Shu snickered and simply replied, "Okay." She walked over to his side. Chapter 481. In the evening, under Yu Shu's persuasion, Shui Rui finally put down his unfinished work and accompanied her back to Wangji Tower. The two stayed up for the whole afternoon, sweating profusely. They went back to their rooms to wash the warm soup and change into fresh clothes. Their hair was half dry and they sat at the same table to eat dinner. Their appetite was better than a few days ago. "It's rare for you to be free for a night, so I won't go home. Let's go upstairs to cool down and talk." After the meal, Yu Shu suggested to drink in the courtyard upstairs, which was exactly what Shui Rui wanted. Ever since Yu Shu had set up a feng shui pond in the corner of the balcony, the air on this stairwell had become increasingly fresh and cool at night. 2 candles with green veils were lit, and a short couch and a square table were placed next to the railing. The silver-necked tin pot was filled with Ichuan wine, and the embroidered plate was decorated with 3 colors of Su lotus blowing leaves. Yu Shu and Shui Rui sat face to face, enjoying the wind and the moon, and there was also a sandalwood stove to send incense. Yu Shu's thoughts were premeditated a long time ago. In order to get some information out of Shui Rui so that she could understand more, she took advantage of the good time and good wine to ask the person in question. She poured him a cup of wine and pressed down on his cup, not letting him take it. She said with a smile, "It's boring to just drink. Big brother, let's play a game." Shui Rui's black and bright eyes glanced at her seemingly obedient face, and he nodded and said, "Okay." Then he saw her turn her left hand and take out 3 wine dice with 6 dots from her sleeve. She threw them into a white plate, making a series of clang sounds. "Where did you get the dice?" Shui Rui asked. "The guests play with them when they drink, so I asked Guichi to find a new set. In fact, these dice were made by her on a whim after she strung the crystal beads on the string to test her luck. You want to play dice and drink with me?" Shui Rui half smiled and teased her, "Based on your luck, I'm afraid this pot of wine is not enough for you to drink alone." Yu Shu shook her finger and slowly pushed the white plate with the dice to him. "Wine is for fun. Let's not bet on wine. Let's bet on something else, big or small. Let's see the number. The loser doesn't have to drink as a penalty. How about telling the truth?" Shui Rui's interest was immediately piqued. He fiddled with the dice with his fingers. "Does it mean that if I have more points than you, you have to answer my questions honestly?" Yu Shu rolled her eyes and said, "I'll listen to whoever has more points." Shui Rui rubbed his chin hesitantly and looked at her thoughtfully. "It's still boring to ask questions. Why don't we add a dice token?" Dice token? Yu Shu wasn't unfamiliar with this. She remembered that on the opening day of the Forgotten Opportunity building, the group of noble ladies who were familiar with Shui Rui had come to support the building, and they were playing exactly like this. Because of this, she had even offended the pampered princess she won. The so-called dice token was the simplest game at the banquet. The loser had to listen to the winner's orders and do whatever he was told to do. "What? Are you afraid?" Shui Rui chuckled and pushed the white plate back with one finger. It was clear that if she didn't agree he wouldn't play. She knew that he was not easy to fool. Yu Shu smiled and gritted her teeth. In order to get him to take the bait, she nodded and agreed, "That's it. But you can only choose one. Either you ask the truth or you play the dice token." Shui Rui held back his laughter. "What if you deny it?" Yu Shu picked up the pot of wine and slammed it in the middle of the table. She said in a heroic manner, "Whoever denies it will drink this pot of wine." Shui Rui stretched out his hand and took the white plate back in front of him. He was afraid that she would change her mind. "I'll go first." He raised his hand and the 3 dice fell to the ground. They hit each other a few times and stopped. 5 points, 6 points. 14 points, it's your turn. The biggest was only 18 points. He lost 14 points on the first try. Yu Shu had to admit that Shui Rui's luck was very good, but she had a trick up her sleeve. Yu Shu secretly pursed her lips and pulled her left sleeve to cover the string of topaz beads. She stretched out her left hand and took the dice. She gently grasped it and threw the white plate. Clang clang, 5 points, 6 points, 4 points. Shui Rui was surprised. 15 points. "Ah, I'm big." Yu Shu did not fail. She smiled proudly and crossed her arms on the table. She looked forward and winked at Shui Rui. "I asked you, you have to tell me the truth." It was a bad start. Shui Rui said helplessly, "Ask. What were you like when you were a child?" As soon as this question came out, Shui Rui knew that he was fooled. He said unhappily, "Didn't you say I'm asking the truth? Is this also a question?" Yu Shu said shamelessly, "Why not? I said I'm asking you the truth, but I didn't say that I only want you to answer clearly. I only care about asking questions. If you can't answer clearly, it's your fault." You little girl. Shui Rui didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was happy that she took the initiative to ask about him for the first time. He narrowed his eyes and recalled. He slowly told her, "As far as I can remember, I was educated by my grandfather. I learned to read at the age of 4. At the age of 6 I learned to read. At the age of 8 I learned to read. At the age of 9, I became the disciple of the late Emperor's Crown Prince, Wang Chong'an. At the age of 12 I could write essays. At the age of 14 I passed the imperial examination." Yu Shu was listening with great interest. Suddenly she stopped. She raised her eyes and signaled him to continue. Shui Rui shook his head. "That's all." "What is this?" Yu Shu was annoyed. She wanted to hear about his experience of growing up, not how he studied. So she said with dissatisfaction, "You are not answering me. Did you only study and study when you were a child? What about your father and mother?" Shui Rui was absent-minded for a moment. Then he lowered his eyes. His thick eyelashes blocked the light in his eyes. His voice was calm as if he was talking about someone else's family. "I didn't lie to you. When I could remember, my father had passed away. My mother was blind. She lived in the deep house all year round. My grandfather was afraid that I would neglect my studies. So I could only see her occasionally." Yu Shu was stunned. She saw him raise his cup and drink it. A picture emerged in her mind. A little boy lost his father and was brought by his strict grandfather. In order to see his mother, he obediently memorized books from morning to night. Day after day, the figure of that diligent reading gradually stretched and overlapped with the gentle and handsome young man in front of her. She suddenly came to her senses. Her heart trembled slightly and her nose was a little sour. She thought in her heart, "Everyone said that he was born rich and had a good life. How could I know that he had such a great time when he was a child?" She didn't regret asking him. She just felt a little sorry for him. "Brother, Haha, why are you pulling a long face? You were the one who wanted to ask, so why can't I just tell you the truth? If I knew this would happen, I would have lied to you." Shui Rui could tell that she was uncomfortable, so he teased her on purpose. Yu Shu forced a smile, but her voice was inevitably a little hoarse. She said, "No, you better tell me the truth. This time it's my turn to roll the dice first." This time she used her right hand to pick up the dice on the plate. This time she didn't do any tricks. She let go and threw it down. Seeing the number of the dice stopped, she couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. 2 points, 1 point. What a bad luck. Ha. Shui Rui chuckled. He stretched out his hand and also threw it. 5 points, 2 points, 10 points. This time I'm the first. His fingers tapped on the flat wine table twice. His eyes looked at her face that still had a lingering charm. Suddenly he turned sideways and smoothed his clothes. He put one hand on the side of his head and the other on his knee. "Come over and sit on my lap." Looking at his actions and listening to his rude request, Yu Shu's face stiffened. The little bit of heartache she felt for him was instantly thrown to the southern frontier. Seeing that she didn't move, Shui Rui held back his laughter. He patted his thigh again and urged, "Hurry up. Don't tell me you want to deny it." This guy would take advantage of others whenever he could. Yu Shu glanced at him unhappily. She then stood up and walked in front of him. She held onto the table and sat on his lap. Her eyes spun when she barely touched a bit of the material of his clothes. She placed her hand on the table and intended to stand up, but who knew that Shui Rui would be a step faster than her. He pulled his arm back and hooked it around her waist, and with a slight bit of force, he pressed her onto his thigh. Yu Shu panicked and instinctively tried to break free. However, after twisting her body twice, her cheeks turned red and she was stunned. It was a hot day. The two of them had bathed in the evening and changed into light clothes. One layer of silk and the other layer of gauze. The thin material couldn't stop her from rubbing against his thigh. She could feel the firmness and warmth of his thigh. She lightly gritted her teeth and sensibly didn't dare move rashly. As soon as she stopped just like this, Shui Rui's hand went around her shoulder, and he carried half of her body on his lap in a slightly careful manner. After that, he lowered his head and leaned close to the beautiful curve of her neck, and he let out a satisfied low laugh. "In the afternoon I wanted to hug you like this." In that stuffy and unbearable record office, She quietly accompanied him for the entire afternoon. She didn't care about how unbearable he was at that time. She didn't mind the boredom. No matter what he was doing, she just wanted to accompany him. Just like what he had hoped for when he was young. Only the heavens knew that it took a lot of patience for him to not notice her gaze on his body. In that kind of situation, he didn't neglect her. Hearing his confession, Yushu's almond-shaped eyes softened and she changed her mind at the last moment. Her hand that was about to reject him brushed past his shoulder and slowly wrapped around his neck. Her fingers intertwined and the tip of her nose rubbed against his full forehead. She smelled the man's unique warm scent. It was as if a shiny stone had been thrown into the lake of her heart, causing a wave of ripples. She watched it sink little by little. This man loved her. Although she didn't know why, it couldn't be any more sincere. Shui Rui keenly noticed her pandering. His heart skipped a beat. He lifted his head from her shoulder and looked into her clear black and white eyes. Under the bright moonlight, there wasn't a trace of color mixed in as she looked at him. It was so pure that it made his heart thirsty. Ah Shu. With a low murmur, he couldn't control himself anymore. His hand tightened as he raised his head and kissed her soft lips. At first it was a teasing kiss, but when he found out that she didn't resist, he slowly went deeper. He lovingly licked her trembling lips and coaxed her into her fragrant mouth. If he hadn't tasted it, how would he know that this sharp tongue would be so sweet and delicious? Their lips and teeth were intertwined. Yushu was kissed until her brain heated up. Her eyes were slightly closed and her cheeks were red. She felt his tongue licking around her mouth and she let out a moan. She bit the tip of his tongue and sucked hard. This was fatal. Shui Rui's waist went numb. He took a deep breath and clamped his legs together to avoid scaring her. At the same time, he couldn't bear to let go, so he hugged her even tighter. His hard chest pressed against her soft chest and slowly rubbed against it. The beauty of it was indescribable. Under the dim light, his peach blossom eyes were bright and seductive. His left hand slid down from her shoulder and gently rubbed her soft back through the thin material of her clothes. Inch by inch, he unknowingly rubbed against her waist and covered her soft buttocks. His mind was shaken and he couldn't help but rub it hard. Yushu opened her eyes all of a sudden. She was embarrassed and annoyed when she felt him kneading her from behind. She panted slightly as she dodged Shui Rui's kiss, and then she moved her hand to her back and grabbed his claws before forcefully pinching him. She did this so that it wouldn't be easy to deal with him if he continued. Don't touch me. Yushu leaned on his shoulder and scolded in a low voice. She was afraid that it would attract people. After being pinched by her, Shui Rui recovered from his infatuation. Although he felt it was a pity, he was content. He suppressed the fire in his heart and took the opportunity to hold her fingers. He pulled her in front of him and kissed her. He coaxed her in a low voice, "Don't be angry. I just want to kiss you. Ashu, you're so good. I'm so happy. Touch my chest, it's beating very fast." Even though Yushu was usually thick-skinned, she didn't have much experience in love. His words made her ears burn red, but even though she was embarrassed, she still let out a light "umph" and reached out to his burning hot left chest. Sure enough, she found that his heart was beating like thunder. Stunned, she couldn't help but put her hand on her chest. After a moment, Yushu pursed her lips and didn't want it to open. Her shoulders trembled, but her eyes were full of laughter. In the end, she couldn't help but hit his chest lightly. She lay on his shoulder and giggled. Ha ha ha. She and Shui Rui, she finally knew what it was. It turned out that the problem was not with Shui Rui but with her. She wasn't worried that he wasn't infatuated enough, but she was afraid that she couldn't treat him wholeheartedly. She was afraid that she couldn't treat him wholeheartedly and let him down. Now this doubt was gone. Because her violent heartbeat just now clearly told her that she was moved by him. How could she let him down? Even though Shui Rui didn't know why she was suddenly so happy, he loved listening to her laughter. He fiddled with the strands of hair on her shoulder and adjusted his breathing. When she was done laughing, he finally asked, "Do you want to continue playing? This game was excellent, but it was a bit tiring." Yushu shook her head and gently poked his shoulder. She smiled and sighed, "Let's stop here for today. Come back another day." "Okay, I'll listen to you." Shui Rui kissed her forehead, took a breath and helped her stand up. He also sat up straight, raised his hand to tidy up her messy clothes and said with a gentle look, "I'm busy these days, I can't take care of you. If you want to know anything about me, just write it down on a piece of paper and bring it to me later. I will answer you. You don't have to waste so much effort to get information from me." After he saw through her thoughts, Yushu felt a sweetness in her heart. The more she looked at him, the more she liked him. She held his handsome face and lowered her head to kiss him. Big brother is the best. Chapter 482. When Yushu got up early to rinse her teeth with salt water, she felt that her lower lip was a little numb. She looked in the mirror and found that her lips were indeed a little swollen. She touched her lower lip gently and thought of the burning embrace last night. Her heart beat faster for a moment. Then she heard Xiaoqing, who was combing her hair, praise her. "You look so good today. Did you sleep well last night?" Yushu looked at the rosy figure in the mirror and hummed guiltily. As soon as she finished tidying up, Guiqi invited her downstairs for dinner. The dining table was very quiet. At first there was only the sound of bowls and chopsticks clanking. Yushu drank a few mouthfuls of sweet porridge and couldn't help but look up at Shui Rui and say, "Why do you keep looking at me? Hurry up and eat. After dinner we will go to the yamen. Don't we still have a lot of things to do?" Shui Rui smiled at her, raised his hand, picked up a roasted plum roll and put it in her bowl and said, "There's no hurry. Try this. It's a new snack from Jiangnan that the cook learned. The weather is hot, so you can eat more rice and noodles in the morning. Then you won't be tired for the day." The main kitchen of Wangji building was managed by the cook, Xiuqing. Xiuqing was not a southerner, but no matter how busy she was, she still had to practice a few dishes from Jiangnan every few days to cater to Yushu's taste. However, Yushu did not grow up in the south at all, so she had never been aware of Shui Rui's intention. After breakfast, Yushu went out with Shui Rui. He sent her home first and then went to the Supreme Court. After entering the house, Yushu only stayed for the time it took to drink a cup of tea before she asked Lu Zhong to hitch the carriage and left. There were no classes in Taisha Shuyuan these days. She was going to the south of the city to find a craftsman who could make fans. Yushu had inquired in the north of the city a while ago. There were at least 17 or 18 fan shops in the north of the city, but none of them could use peach roots to make fans. Therefore, she simply changed her direction and went to the south of the city, which was crowded and chaotic. However, the southern part of the city was not the same as the northern part. After an hour and 3 streets, Yushu finally found an old fan shop in an alley. The carriage stopped halfway. She walked for a while and found a small shop called Hall of 100 Folds. Yushu wiped the sweat off her forehead. Hesitantly, she pushed open the bamboo curtain and entered. She felt dizzy. Inside the concave-shaped central room, the 3 walls were filled with fans. One side was filled with colorful female fans, the other side was filled with rosin fans, and the other side was filled with all kinds of cool fans of various shapes and sizes. There were more than 100 of them. She stood at the door in a daze for a moment, then became happy and went forward to ask the middle-aged man who was twisting copper wire next to the shelf. "Shopkeeper." The man didn't even bother to raise his head and replied, "Pick whatever you want from the wall. If you like it, come and pay for it. If you damage it, you'll have to pay twice the price. If you steal, you'll be sent to the officials." Yushu's mouth twitched. "Who sells things like this? I'm not here to buy fans. I just want to ask, does your shop's craftsman know how to use peachwood to make fans?" The middle-aged man stopped his work and turned to look at her. "Peachwood root?" "Yes, it's peachwood root. Can you make it?" "Yes, I can." Hearing this, Yushu wasn't in a hurry to be happy. She first asked about the details. "I have a 100-year-old peachwood root. I want to make a folding fan for men. The fan bone should be 9 inches and 5 inches long. It should have 16 openings and 2 sides. It should be hard to break. Can you make it?" "Yes, I can." Yushu saw that he looked honest and didn't look like he was bragging. She was happy and hurriedly said, "Then I'll go back and get the wood. Then we can discuss again. We can talk about the money, but don't break anything." She turned around and was about to leave. But she heard a sneer behind her. "I said I can make it. Did I promise to make it for you? I only sell fans in my shop. I don't care about custom-made ones. You can buy those on the wall if you want. Take care." Yushu was deflated. She turned around with a strange expression. She looked at the man who lowered his head to twist the copper wire again. Originally, she didn't trust his skills. But now, she was sure that such an arrogant person was really capable. She opened her mouth and her eyes flashed. She put on a disdainful face. "If you don't know how to make it, then you don't know how to make it." It wasn't easy to find someone who could make a fan. How could she let go of this opportunity? She wanted to provoke him and then take the opportunity to trick him. But the other party seemed to have closed his ears. No matter what she said, he didn't care about her. Yushu talked nonsense for a long time. Her mouth was dry. She had no choice but to go back and come back tomorrow. She didn't believe that this person wouldn't let her go if she visited him every day. She turned around and walked to the door. She saw a person coming in. Fifth uncle, I'm here. You Swansea? Young Master Xan? Yushu didn't expect to meet Xan Lu's fifth cousin, Xan Yingguang here. She was surprised for a moment, and then she realized what the handsome young man in front of her had just called. Fifth uncle? When Xan Lishan saw his nephew coming, he put down his work and walked over. He took the 2 paper bags from Xan Yingguang's hands. He glanced at Yushu and asked his nephew, "You know this noisy girl?" 2 black lines squeezed on Yushu's forehead. Xan Yingguang looked at Yushu apologetically and said to Xan Lishan, "Fifth uncle, this is Miss Yu, a double-ranked female fortune teller in this year's Dian examination. She is a good friend of 6th younger sister." He kindly told Yushu, "This is my uncle." This time Yushu was puzzled. As far as she knew, didn't Xan Lu's father say that there were 4 brothers? Where did this uncle come from? This middle-aged man looked less than 40 years old. His skin was rough. He didn't look like the master of the Xan family. But Xan Yingguang called him uncle, so he was obviously her father's brother. It was strange. Female fortune teller? Xan Lishan stared at Yushu a few more times. At this time he looked interested, the one who didn't give face to that old thing Han Wenguang and forcibly took his disciple's seal? Hearing his tone, Yushu said seriously, "Fifth Master Xan is wrong. I didn't forcibly take it. I won it fair and square. They were not as good as me." "Ha," Xan Lishan said with a smile. When he looked at Yushu again, he suddenly found her more pleasing to the eye. He nodded and said, "Bring that piece of mahogany root tomorrow and let me have a look." This time Yushu was happy. She secretly wanted to make peace through Xan Lu, who knew that this 5th Master Xan was a temperamental person. With one sentence he directly agreed to her matter. Afraid that he would change his mind again, Yushu hurriedly thanked him and moved aside. She said goodbye to the uncle and nephew and left first. After she left, Xan Yingguang asked, "Fifth uncle, what happened just now?" Xan Lishan told him that Yushu wanted to make a mahogany root fan. Then he commented with interest, "I originally thought that she was a rich girl who randomly drew lots. It turns out that she is half an expert. I told you about the century-old mahogany root. Do you still remember what it is used for?" Xan Yingguang thought for a moment and said, "Mahogany is the essence of 5 kinds of wood. A century-old mahogany root produces innate yang qi. It can suppress hundreds of ghosts. It is the most evil thing in the world." "Not bad. It seems that you usually don't slack off." Xan Lishan patted his nephew's shoulder with satisfaction. He took him and walked inside. "Let's go to the back. I will show you a kite that I have just modified. You only need to fly 65 feet to know tomorrow's weather." "Fifth uncle, wait. I have something to ask you to take a look at." Xan Yingguang pulled him and took out a pouch from his bosom. He opened it and took out a string of crystal-clear water beads. Seeing that thing, Xan Lishan was stunned and immediately took it. It was cool in his hand. He closed his eyes and rubbed it for a while. He took a deep breath and opened his eyes again, but they were full of excitement. This bead has such a strong spiritual energy. Although it is 1 part natural, it is 90% man-made. It's strange. Did you raise it? Good boy, tell me quickly. Xan Yingguang's expression instantly became serious. He shook his head and said, "It's not me. It's the birthday gift that Miss Yu gave to 6th younger sister just now. Fei Fei wore it for a few days and said that she slept very well at night. I was curious and borrowed it. Sure enough, after a good night's sleep, she was in good spirits the next day. I faintly feel that the spiritual energy on this bracelet is most likely raised, so it is so strong that it has such a miraculous effect. It's not like jade that needs to be nourished for a long time. According to 5th uncle, it is 90% raised by people. It's really strange. Their Xan family was a big feng shui family. Dating back 6 generations, there was an old ancestor who guarded a jade mountain. Later generations, they explored the method of nourishing objects with feng shui and using objects to benefit people. After ups and downs, they had a place today. It could be said that when it came to nourishing artifacts, their Xan family was the best in the secular world. The list of wonderful and rare objects had been passed down for several generations. However, the most exquisite method was to nourish the natural spiritual jade with 80% spiritual energy. This small string of beads had 90% spiritual energy. Of course, it couldn't be compared like this. The Xan family's 80% spiritual energy could last for a long time, but this string of beads could only last for 2 months at most. However, this was also the amazing part. Because the spiritual energy constantly spread out, it greatly benefited the wearer, and it was the most obvious at the beginning. "Fifth uncle, Xn Yingguang looked at Xn Lishan, who seemed to be deep in thought, and hesitated. Do you think we should tell our family about this? Xn Lishan came back to his senses and glanced at him. He fiddled with the white crystal beads in his hand and slowly sneered. Tell our family, then let them threaten and bribe to find out about the other person's method of nourishing objects, take it for their own use and make use of it so that the Xn family's reputation in the 12 prefectures goes up another level? Xn Yingguang saw that he was angry and quickly smiled bitterly. Don't be angry. I won't say anything, okay? Xn Lishan stuffed the string of beads back to him and said unhappily, people who learn the most important thing is to have a good temperament. I've taught you for 3 years but you're still so muddle-headed. I'm really angry. Take it back and give it to Fei Fei. Don't talk too much. Xn Yingguang nodded and then said worriedly, what if father and the others find out themselves? Xn Lishan snorted. In the whole mansion, other than your old ancestor, even your grandfather doesn't have the foresight of an unfilial son like me. Chapter 483. The next day Yushu goes to Wangji Tower early in the morning to get the mahogany root. She puts the wood in the dew wind pool for 3 or 4 days. Although the change is not as amazing as that of the crystal beads, and there is no clue on the surface, there is a faint smell of wood. She doesn't remember that this century-old mahogany root had this smell before. She wrapped it in a piece of silk. Yushu didn't go out in a hurry but asked Xiao Qing to find the shopkeeper Lin Fu. Miss, what can I do for you? Old Lin, you are from Anling. You should have heard a lot about the past years in the capital, right? I want to ask you about something. I don't know if you know. Lin Fu nodded and stood 3 steps away from Yushu to answer. I am a servant of the Shui family. I have lived in Anling for nearly 40 years. Miss, feel free to ask. Yushu touched the silk bag on the tea table and asked curiously, is there a 5th master in the Xan family, one of the 12 families? 5th master? Lin Fu was stunned. He didn't need Yushu to ask in detail and blurted out, you are asking about the one who was expelled from the Xan family many years ago? Yushu's eyes lit up. Yes, it should be him. Tell me about this person. Yes. Lin Fu saw that she was interested, so he recalled and said what he knew. It was about 10 years ago. At that time, the 5th master of the Xan family was very famous in the capital. None of the young masters of the 12 families could be compared to him. He was the top of the Dian list and no one had seen him for 20 years. Tut-tut, Yushu was surprised. She didn't expect that the eccentric shopkeeper in the fan shop was a 3rd-class DE master. What else? Since he was so capable, why was he expelled from the family? It is said that because he was unfilial, the 5th master Xan once insulted his father in public, so that the left judge Xan broke off the relationship with him in anger. That year in Anling City because of this matter was discussed for a while, and then there was no more news. I don't know where the 5th master Xan went. Why did you ask about him out of nowhere? Yushu didn't want to explain, so she waved her hand and said, I was just casually asking. Alright, you can go back to your work. After sending Lin Fu away, Yushu sat down and thought for a while before leaving with the mahogany root. There was a fan shop in the alley. When Yushu came in, she saw Xn Lishan sitting behind the counter and carving a piece of black wood. She greeted him first. 5th Master Xn, I'm here. Xn Lishan blew the sawdust in his hand and said with a frown, Don't call me 5th Lord, call me shopkeeper. Yes, Manager Xian. Yushu had a favor to ask of him, so she did not care about his temper. She stepped forward and placed the bundle in front of him. She untied it and said, This is the century-old mahogany root. I want to make a fan material. Have a look. Seeing the black gold mahogany root was exposed when the bundle was opened, Xn Lishan stopped what he was doing and held it in front of him. He gently touched it for a while and then without saying hello to Yushu, he took a carving knife and cut 2 pieces from it. He brought it to the tip of his nose and took a breath. He squinted and said, Oh my God, did you just dig this out or did you raise it with feng shui? Looking at his expression, Yushu paid attention and said vaguely, I raised it for a while. This was a half-truth. She just put this piece of wood beside the feng shui pool where she raised crystal stones, and did not take special care of it. Xn Lishan raised his head and stared at her for a few times. He suddenly asked, Who taught you feng shui? Yushu blinked her eyes and said, My master, of course. Although strictly speaking, Qing Zheng did not teach her feng shui metaphysics in detail, she benefited a lot from the 8 Gates life and death skills. Not only did it help her derive the law of time of calamity, but it also contained the essentials of feng shui. Even the feng shui pool on the balcony of Wangji Tower was made by her according to the 5 elements position of the 8 gates life and death skills. Xen Lishan asked curiously, "Who is your master?" Since Yushu stood out in the Dian examination, she was often asked this question, so she answered very fluently, "My master is a man of Taoism, a hermit in the mountain. His name is not worthy of the Taoist title." Hearing this, Xen Lishan's previous doubts were explained. It turned out that there was such a hermit Taoist priest. No wonder he could teach such an extraordinary apprentice who dared to challenge Han Wenguang. Presumably, the method of raising things was also passed down by her master. Yushu was concerned about whether her fan could be made well, so she asked again, "Shopkeeper Xen, do you think this piece of wood can be made into a fan?" "Yes, it can." Xen Lishan touched the wood under his palm and felt the thick essence on it. A smile appeared on his stiff face. "It's 9 inches and 5 inches long, 16 gears, a double-sided folding fan, right? What other requirements do you have? Tell me all of them." Yushu said, "Pick the best material for the surface of the fan for me, or else it won't be afraid of water, moisture, or its color will not fade." Xen Lishan touched his chin and thought for a while, then said, "Your peachwood fan is not commonly used for stirring the wind. It will be a waste to use it with ordinary shen paper or silk. How about this? I have a piece of cold silkworm dark pupa silk in my collection. It is also a rare item. Not to mention waterproof and moisture-proof, even ordinary sharp weapons can't cut it. It will be just right to use this fan bone to suppress Yin and evil. But I can't give it to you for free." Hearing this, Yushu's mind swayed. Almost without hesitation she said, "If you are willing to part with it, I am willing to pay any amount of money." If she didn't have enough money, she could hide it from Zhao Hui and use the real money in her small treasury first. When her crystal was sold, she would make up for it. This rare item, if she missed this opportunity, she wouldn't have this opportunity again. Xen Lishan shook his head and said, "There's no need for money. In exchange for my cold silkworm dark pupa silk, even if you give me 10,000 gold, I won't even bother to look at you. I know you have a kind of strange stone called crystal. You can use that to exchange with me." Hearing this, Yushu's eyes flashed. She didn't immediately agree. Instead, she raised her eyebrows and said, "Shopkeeper Xn is a person who knows what's good and what's bad. My crystal is also a unique treasure. How do you plan to exchange with me?" Xn Lishan laughed and stretched out his palm. He flipped it twice and said, "I want the bracelet that you gave to my niece. I want 10 of them that are exactly the same." Yushu's eyelids twitched. Without thinking, she shook her head and refused. "That can't be done. Do you think they are cabbages? They are still weighed by weight. At most, I will give you 2 to play with." It wasn't that she couldn't gather 10 bracelets, but this thing was her future source of income. It was a rare commodity. She had to sell it slowly. If she just casually gave a pile of it to him, it would be a common thing on the street. Xen Lishan didn't blink and stretched out his hand again, then 8. Yushu secretly rolled her eyes. She wanted 4? She could just make up a table of mahjong. 3, no more. She thought Xen Lishan would bargain again. Unexpectedly, he turned his head and said, 8. If you don't want to give, then forget it. I won't make your fan anymore. Was this person really a 3rd-grade DE master? Where did this scoundrel come from? After taking a deep breath, Yushu softened and said gently, "Then 4. For then. I can give you 4 different colors, but you have to promise me that you won't give them away or resell them. If that's not enough, then I'll have to find someone else to make them. Deal?" Xen Lishan slapped the counter and wrinkled his face with a smile. He asked for the crystal stone because he was interested in it and wanted to collect it. He didn't want to sell it. He didn't care what Yushu said. Yushu muttered to herself, "Why did I feel that this person didn't look like a businessman yesterday? I really misjudged him. Fortunately, I am not easy to fool." She pretended to be distressed but secretly laughed. If he really insisted on not making the fan for her, she would have no choice. Not to mention 8, she would even give him 10. "Do you want to write a promissory note?" Yushu was afraid that he would go back on his words. Xen Lishan wrote her a note without hesitation. They agreed that after this century-old peach root was made into a fan, Yushu would give him 4 crystal bracelets of different colors in exchange. In this way they even saved the manual labor. She got the better deal. After receiving the promissory note and setting a date to pick up the goods, Yushu was relieved to leave the peach root. When Xen Lishan became impatient again, she tactfully said goodbye and left. With a load off her mind, Yushu could finally calm down and ponder over her law of the time of calamity. Ever since she came back from Huajin Garden, she had relied on the criminal record she had on hand to determine the culprit of the time of calamity. She had successfully completed the task by using the zodiac to determine the culprit and gender. Next, she aimed at the villain and did the same thing, using the zodiac sign to determine the value. Yushu could already foresee that the more things she deduced, the more detailed the results she could calculate in the future. For example, for the disaster of Hutianer, she could calculate the zodiac sign of the person who hurt the child. She could also directly infer who the person who harbored evil intentions towards Hutianer was based on the zodiac sign of the villain. The clearer the scope, the easier it would be to deal with. As the rule of the time of disaster became more comprehensive, she became more and more confident. In Anling City, where people's hearts were unpredictable, one day she could control her own fate by controlling the fate of others. In the blink of an eye, another 2 days passed. During this time, Yushu went to Xiajiang guest house. Xia Jiangmin annotated the 8 characters of Qiu Yueling's marriage using the art of 6 Yao lines to her. Once again she felt sorry for Yushu. You're good at everything. You're much smarter than me. It's just that you don't have enough talent and wisdom. Otherwise you could use the art of 6 Yao lines to calculate others. With this alone, you can do whatever you want in the capital city. If you spread the word, many nobles would fight to invite you to be a guest of honor. However, the reputation of a female fortune teller sounds good. Only those businessmen will take notice of it. Yushu felt that it was a pity, but she didn't force it. It should be known that Daoish Qingzheng taught her the art of 6 Yao lines to make up for her incompatibility. Therefore she should be secretly happy that she could make a rough calculation for herself. By the way, Xia Jiangmin grabbed her hand and a pair of bright almond-shaped eyes suddenly flashed. It was very attractive. Yesterday Miss Xie of the Xie family came to the guest house. I heard her mention the Hibiscus Gentleman's Banquet on the 6th of June. Did you receive the invitation? Chapter 484. The 6th day of the 6th month was the Heavenly Blessing Festival. It was said that on this day the Jade Emperor's daughter descended to the mortal world to play. She turned into a pure and refined water lotus by the lake. Coincidentally, a scholar passed by and took pity on her lonely shadow. Thus, he visited her by the lake every morning and evening, reciting poems and painting for her. The fairy fell in love with him and turned back into a beautiful woman. Then she met the scholar by chance. A year later they became husband and wife and loved each other. However, the good times did not last long. The Jade Emperor noticed his daughter's whereabouts and sent the celestial soldiers to the mortal world to capture her. The fairy refused to leave her husband and return to the heavenly court, so she disobeyed the laws of heaven. The Jade Emperor was furious. In front of the scholar, he turned his daughter into a lotus flower and punished her for 100 years before she could return to her human form. 1 day in heaven was 10 years on earth. However, mortals only lived for 100 years. How could the scholar live until then? The Jade Emperor thought that the mortal would not wait long. Faced with a lotus flower that could not speak, he would have a change of heart sooner or later. He wanted to use this opportunity to make his daughter give up on the scholar. Who knew that in the blink of an eye 50 years had passed? One day the Jade Emperor thought of his daughter and went down to the mortal world. In a big house, he saw the fairy who was still a lotus flower and an old man with white hair sitting by the lotus pond. The Jade Emperor recognized the old man as the scholar. In surprise he appeared and asked him, "It has been so many years, are you still waiting for her?" At this point Xia Jiangmin's eyes turned slightly red. She sniffed and asked Yushu, "Guess how did the old man answer?" Yushu was fascinated and shook her head gently. The first half of the story was vulgar, but the second half was a little touching. Xia Jiangmin's eyes moved and there was a trace of yearning in her expression. She said, "He said that when he married his wife, he made a vow that he would never leave her in this life. So as long as he was alive he would never leave her." The Jade Emperor was moved and took back his daughter's punishment. He turned the lotus flower back into a human form. After 50 years he finally saw his beloved wife again. He closed his eyes by the lotus pond in satisfaction and passed away. Then tears fell from her eyes. Although Yushu was not as emotional as her, she was not indifferent. She patted the back of her hand and said gently, "The scholar and the fairy were both infatuated. Even though they only had one flower they still spent 50 years together, didn't they?" Hearing that, Xia Jiangmin nodded slowly. "That's right. This scholar is a man of his word. He is a true gentleman, and the fairy is also infatuated." The Jade Emperor was moved by their persistence. Every year on the 6th day of the 6th month in the human world, which is also the day that the scholar and the fairy meet, He asked the Moon Elder to tie a red thread for those infatuated men and women in the world. It was a heavenly blessing. Today was the first time Yushu heard of such a special day. It sounded similar to the Double Seventh Festival. The difference was that the Double Seventh Festival was the Women's Day. Women prayed for craftsmanship and worshipped the Weaver Girl, hoping that they would have a husband in the future. The Heaven's Blessing Festival existed to bless the marriage between men and women. Then what is this gentleman's hibiscus banquet that you mentioned? Xia Jiangmin wiped the corner of her eyes with a handkerchief. It was said that women were the most fickle. She was still crying a moment ago, but now she had a smile on her face. She even excitedly said to Yushu, "This has a long history. It can be traced back to the time when our Dan Empire was just founded. The Anling was just built. The imperial court was divided into 3 factions. There were civil officials and military generals. There was also the rising faction of Master Yi. These noble families and talented people did not get along well with each other. Thus, Empress Ningzhen thought of a way. Every year on the Heaven's Blessing Festival, she would hold a gentleman's hibiscus banquet and invite all the unmarried young men and women in the capital to attend. The gentleman's hibiscus banquet was personally hosted by Empress Ningzhen. Any talented person, no matter male or female, could obtain a water hibiscus made of gold and jade. And the person who obtained the gold and jade hibiscus, Xia Jiangmin suddenly lowered her voice and squeezed Yushu's hand. She excitedly said, "Then they can express their love to the man or woman they like. If the two are in love, then the Heaven's Blessing Festival will be the matchmaker and they will be fated to be together." Yushu was surprised to hear this. She thought to herself and could not help but praise the Empress Ningzhen of 300 years ago. She was an expert at playing politics. After the Jin were expelled and the new dynasty was established, the civil and military officials in the court were at odds with each other. The affairs of the country were unstable. The most effective method was to have them marry each other. Thus, there was the gentleman's hibiscus banquet. But today, the gentleman's hibiscus banquet no longer had its original purpose. The only thing that people would flock to like ducks was that gold and jade hibiscus. Then what if there was one party who had wishful thinking? Yushu asked. For example, if a man obtained the gold and jade hibiscus and expressed his love to a woman, if the woman rejected, wouldn't her reputation be affected? Xia Jiangmin smiled and said, "I also think so. But Miss Xie told me that to be selected to obtain the gold and jade hibiscus at the gentleman's hibiscus banquet is a kind of glory. Even if it was rejected because it was not to one's liking, others would be envious." As she said this, she shook Yushu's arm and winked at her. "This kind of banquet, I won't have the chance to go. Ashu, you are the great female divination master. Now that your reputation is resounding, this year's gentleman's hibiscus banquet will definitely send you an invitation. When the time comes, you must attend. When you return, you must tell me about it. If I receive an invitation, I will go." In reality, Yushu wasn't interested in this kind of ancient matchmaking activity. But if there was a chance to see the current empress, there was no harm in joining in the fun. Xia Jiangmin looked her up and down again and couldn't help but remind her, "You better prepare your clothes and jewelry early. There are still some days left. Don't go sloppily on that day and cause others to laugh at you." "I know." Yushu's mouth was perfunctory. She stood up and said, "It's getting late. I should go. I'll come see you tomorrow." Xia Jiangmin said angrily, "But you said it. Don't not hear from me for 10 days or half a month again. I'll see you off." Xia Jiangmin sent Yushu out of the rear courtyard. She then followed a servant girl out the front door. When she sat on the horse carriage on the way home, she suddenly realized something. Her expression wasn't as calm as before. Would Shui Rui go to the gentleman's hibiscus banquet? In the second half of May, Sima Kuei had an astrology class. Yushu went to see Xia Jiangmin yesterday. She was a little concerned about the gentleman's hibiscus banquet. So when she saw Xen Lu today, she asked, "Have you received the invitation to the gentleman's hibiscus banquet?" Xen Lu hadn't seen her for a few days. He was about to show her the white crystal on his wrist when she suddenly asked him, "Not yet. How did you get it?" He asked in a daze, "Not yet. How did you get it?" Yushu shook her head, "I just heard about it yesterday." "Oh, you're not from Anling. No wonder you don't know about it." Xen Lu patted his forehead as if he just realized this. The students all came early. They stood near the observatory in 2s and 3s. Sima Kuei hadn't arrived yet. Yushu and Xen Lu stood under a ginkgo tree and talked. Xen Lu knew more about the gentleman's hibiscus banquet than Xia Jiangmin. After a while, Yushu had a deeper understanding of this banquet that had been passed down for more than 200 years. It turned out that the gentleman's hibiscus banquet wasn't necessarily hosted by the current empress. Last year, when the empress was ill, she entrusted the banquet to consort LV Xian. This year, it was still unknown which noble in the palace would be hosting. As for the young men and women who were invited to the banquet, they could be divided into 4 groups. The first group were the children of aristocratic families. The second group were the meritorious nobles. The third group were the aristocrats. The last group were the new talents like Yu Shu, who had used the Dian or the imperial examinations to get rid of their white status. Speaking of this, Xan Lu suddenly remembered the rumors he heard the day before. He changed the topic and frowned. I was just about to ask you. What's going on with that Zhan Shuiyuan? Why did I hear that you slapped her in Zong? I also heard that when you went to worship the ancestors, she falsely accused you of stealing her treasure Chanyu in Huajin Garden. So she owed you 10 slaps. These days there are rumors everywhere in Taisha Library. Are these things true? Yu Shu raised her eyebrows. She thought that Situ Qinglan's words had spread fast. There is such a thing. Do you know Cui Yun? She was the one who stole Zhan Shuiyuan's Tianyu. Then the 2 of them falsely accused me and almost started a fight in Huajin Garden. She told Xan Lu about what happened that evening. Xan Lu was furious. What kind of people are they? They are so shameless. You should really slap them hard in the face. Let's see if they still dare to slander people in the future. Then he rejoiced. Fortunately, this matter has been investigated clearly. Otherwise, if we were to crown you with the crime of theft, it would only be a small matter of losing face. Moreover, it would cause others to think that your conduct is improper. Let's not talk about the future. Let's just talk about this gentleman's hibiscus banquet. Hearing this, a thought flashed through Yu Shu's mind. It was so fast that she couldn't catch it. Academician Sima is here. Let's go. Xan Lu glanced at the students who had gathered in the south and pulled her. Yu Shu's thoughts were interrupted. She didn't have time to think too much. She went up with Xan Lu to greet Academician Sima. An hour later, at the end of the class, Sima Kuei finally informed all the students present of one thing. After 9 o'clock tonight, we will measure the stars at the observatory. I have some errands to run, so I entrust Academician Jing to give a lecture. Don't be naughty and come on time. You can stay in the library tonight and go back tomorrow. There were whispers below. Most people were excited, but there were a few who were depressed. This included Yu Shu and Xan Lu. The reason for their depression was different. Lotus Room, I don't want to go to the observatory tonight. Do you think I should sneak back home? Xan Lu had always been traumatized by Chao Yiling's murder. Yu Shu didn't want to stay either. She was suspicious about Sima Kuei suddenly asking Jing Chen to speak on his behalf. She guessed that Jing Chen was looking for an opportunity to get close to her. But she didn't want to delay her studies because of this. Lotus Room? Chapter 485. It drizzles in the evening. Yu Shu and Xan Lu spend their dinner in a restaurant near Taisha Shuyuan. When the rain stops, they take the packed snacks and go to the Shuyuan. The sky is dark and there is a cool breeze. Xan Lu sees that Yu Shu is wearing thin clothes, so he goes back to the girls' dormitory and finds a spare cloak for her to wear. It's only 6:45 o'clock. They take their things and go to the observatory together. On the way, they meet several students who know each other. They are all staying to observe the stars tonight. They are holding teapots, cushions, candles and other things in their hands. They are ready to stay up late. Xan Lu becomes more courageous when he sees so many people. He holds Yu Shu's hand and walks on the dark veranda. He whispers to her, Zhan Shuiyuan is apprenticed to Academician Jing, right? Do you think she will come tonight? If Jing Chen teaches on behalf of him, he will probably bring his students. Yu Shu answers absent-mindedly, how do I know? Xan Lu pursed his lips and said, I guess she doesn't have the face to come. These 2 days, everyone in the library is talking about how many slaps she owes you. I don't believe she would dare to come to you, unless she thinks she hasn't lost enough face. Yu Shu says, she has no time to think about Zhan Shuiyuan. The observatory is not quiet tonight. When Yu Shu and Xan Lu arrive, there are already more than 10 people gathered under the south wall. At first glance, there are many young men and women. These people stand in 2 groups. It is obvious that one group is Sima Kuei's student and the other is Jing Chen's student. Because Jing Chen is among them. He has arrived early and is surrounded by his female students to ask for advice. He is wearing a loose silk robe, which makes him stand out and very eye-catching. Xan Lu looks at the girls and whispers to Yu Shu, do you see? This is the gentleman's hibiscus banquet. Some people inevitably have wishful thinking and daydream about living in the princess mansion. Although it was said that female disguise artists didn't bother with trifles, there were still people who couldn't stand the sight of her circling around a man. Not only did Xan Lu feel disdain, there were also a few people present who secretly rolled their eyes. Yu Shu, on the other hand, looked at Jing Qin, who was still calm and composed even though he was surrounded by the fragrance of his daughter. She felt it was strange. In her impression, Jing Qin was a very dogmatic Taoist. It wasn't that he didn't know how to keep a distance between men and women, but his behavior was somewhat unlike him. Is everyone here? Jing Qin's words silenced the voices on both sides. His eyes revealed a bit of impatience. He turned his head and saw Yu Shu's figure not far away. His furrowed eyebrows immediately calmed down. There were nearly 40 students under the 2 academicians. As soon as the time passed, except for a few who had to resign, everyone who was supposed to be there had arrived. Yu Shu glanced around and saw Cui Yun, who was hiding behind a few girls and peeking at her. However, she didn't see Zhan Shuiyuan. It seemed that the 2 slaps on her face that day were not in vain. At least there was one less annoying fly in front of her. Jing Qin asked someone to fill the stone tablet at the bottom of the observatory with clean water. He found a suitable place and explained 7 or 8 star positions in a simple and clear manner. When they all understood, he left half of the students to observe the stone tablet and brought the other half to the observatory. Xan Lu didn't want to go on the observatory, so he pulled Yu Shu's back when Jing Qin wasn't paying attention. He winked at her and used her as a cover to blend in with the remaining half of the students. On the observatory, Yu Shu stood at a place not far from Jing Qin. Listening to his clear and bright voice on the empty building, he used exquisite words to point out the stars. She could even divert her attention to laugh at herself. That day he promised to teach her astrology. Today he finally fulfilled his promise. It was just that he had changed from a small kitchen to a big pot of rice. I will first teach you a pithy formula about the positions of the stars to make it easier to remember. Memorize it carefully and you can save yourself some trouble when you observe the stars. Jiao, Kong, Di, Chu are always in the Qin position. Di, Fang, Xi and Wei are in the Mao position. Wei, Ji, Do are in the Yin position. Do and Yo, Nu, Cho are in the Gong position. Nu, Su, Wei are in the Gong position. Yu Shu didn't have a good memory, so she just took a pen and memorized it. She didn't notice that Jing Qin was looking at her. Jing Qin repeated the pithy formula 3 times. Seeing that everyone had memorized it, he pointed at them and assigned them. Tonight, you will watch from upstairs for 2 hours. You 2 go to the Cho Shi position in the east. You 2 go to the Xin Shi position in the west. You and you stand in the Hai Shi position. The observatory was very spacious. Yu Shu was pointed to a windbreak wall near the staircase. There was no one on the left, but there were 2 people standing 2 feet away on the right. She looked around, put the cushion in her hand on the ground, blew out the lantern and sat down with her legs crossed. She put her hands on the side of her body and looked up. A light rain washed away the color of the sky. The quiet night sky was very bright and moving. There were countless stars in the summer sky, big and small, embellished into a majestic Milky Way star chart. It was boundless, mysterious and unfathomable. Just like in life, fate was hard to predict. Birth, old age, sickness and death were all God's will. No matter how arrogant a person was, when looking at the endless Milky Way, he would also feel a little humble. How many stars do you know in the sky? A low voice came from above Yu Shu's head. It was only when she came back to her senses that she realized Jing Qin had walked to her side and was standing still. He was so close that if she moved her arm, she would be able to touch the hem of his clothes. Yu Shu didn't move. She just turned her head to look at him, then looked at the distant night sky. Jing Qin, on the other hand, lowered his head. Looking at her indifferent expression, he slowly clenched his fists by his side. Silence spread between them. It was not until Jing Qin's palms were covered in sweat that he heard Yu Shu's voice, which was calm and almost emotionless. I don't know what regret is. Once I decide to do something, I will never look back. Whether it's right or wrong, I just want to have a clear conscience. What about you? Do you regret it now? She didn't regret getting to know Jing Qin outside Yang City. She didn't regret saving him on the riverbank. She didn't regret falling in love with him after a life-and-death battle. She didn't regret putting herself in danger for him. She didn't regret risking everything for him, but now she didn't care. Jing Qin's eyelashes trembled slightly. His handsome face gradually showed a color of shame. He raised his head, not daring to look directly into her eyes, but he couldn't deny it. I do regret it. He regretted letting her down. He regretted letting down the only person in the world who truly cared for him. Yu Shu sneered, as if she already knew that he would answer like this and was not surprised at all. She pushed herself up from the ground and casually patted her clothes. Ignoring the cushions and kettle on the ground, she turned around and walked towards the stairs. She stepped down the stairs and looked up at him. Jing Chen watched her disappear at the top of the stairs. Her last look kept replaying in his mind. It was not a mocking look, nor was it sarcastic. It was a look of indifference. His heart suddenly tightened. An unfamiliar feeling of sadness welled up in him, making him panic. He froze for a moment, then suddenly strode forward and chased her down the stairs. He took a few steps at a time. Soon he saw Yu Shu's figure around the corner. Without thinking, he reached out and grabbed her sleeve. Xiaoyu. Yu Shu was forced to stop. She looked up at the hand that was gripping her sleeve tightly. Seeing his nervous face, she frowned and lowered her voice. What are you doing? Who was the one who said that they would cut off all ties? Have you forgotten? Let go. However, Jing Chen refused to let go. He pulled her down instead. Come with me. I have something very important to tell you. It was enough that he let her down once. He didn't want to hide it today and regret it in the future. Yu Shu looked at Jing Chen, who was holding her wrist and walking in front of her. Her eyes flashed but quickly darkened. She knew that he had another purpose for approaching her. She didn't shake him off again. Without saying a word, she followed him down the stairs from the other side of the observatory. They avoided the group of students who were observing Shigui downstairs and walked towards the small building in the distance. The small building near the observatory was empty. Jing Chen pushed the door open and asked Yu Shu to wait outside. He found a candle and lit it. He picked up the candlestick and turned around to call her. Xiaoyu, come in. Yu Shu glanced inside. When she didn't find anything strange, she walked in. Jing Chen held the lamp and took her to the central hall on the second floor. He placed the candlestick on the coffee table. Yu Shu walked over and opened a window facing the east. The night flowed in. Standing by the window, she could see the view of the observatory from afar. She leaned against the cold windowsill and crossed her arms. She raised her eyes and said, What secret do you want to tell? Why do you have to come to such a place where no one is around? Jing Chen stood in front of her. He was only 3 to 5 steps away from her. Such a distance made him feel slightly at ease. He clenched his right hand as if he was taking a breath and slowly loosened it. Shui Yun said that she told you that I am the Great Calamity. Hearing this, Yu Shu nodded hesitantly. That time, Shui Yun lured her out and used Jing Chen's secret as bait. She was talking about the Great Calamity. Later, she learned that Shui Yun framed her, so she thought that the Great Calamity was also a lie. Looking at Jing Chen now, could it be true? She did tell me, but I didn't believe her. It's true. Jing Chen's face showed a trace of bitterness. My birth is related to the country of Dan. Do you still remember that you have seen my father's exam paper? It said, Great fortune brings disaster. That's me. If I want peace and people to be at peace, I must find the person who broke my fate and solve my fate. Otherwise, not only will the elders of my sect die soon, but the world will also be in danger. After receiving confirmation, Yu Shu's heart pounded. It was very difficult for her not to feel her scalp tingle at Jing Chen's shocking birth. If the Great Calamity could really shake the rise and fall of this great nation, then Jing Chen's fate could really shake the world with a single pull. After the shock, Yu Shu was full of doubts. Since there was such a relationship of interests, it was even more impossible for Jing Chen to be involved with her before breaking his fate. She suppressed the shock and asked hesitantly, Could it be that you have found the person who broke your fate and solved your fate? Jing Chen shook his head gently and whispered, I found the person who broke my fate, but I still haven't broken my fate. Yu Shu was not very surprised because she had already guessed it, but she was even more puzzled. She couldn't help but question Jing Chen, Since you haven't broken your fate, you still dare to provoke me. Aren't you afraid that your Taoist heart will be affected and harm your master and the others? Hearing her say this, Jing Chen's face couldn't help but become gloomy. He said coldly, Those are all lies. Kata Star is evil and has nothing to do with my Taoist heart. My sect and the royal family of Da-an have an agreement. They protect my life, but they are afraid that I won't be able to break my fate in the future, so they have taught me to be inhumane since I was a child. The more Yu Shu listened, the more confused she became. Looking at the coldness that flashed across Jing Chen's face, she didn't know why, but she felt a little uneasy. She licked her lips, held the window railing behind her and asked, What do you mean by telling me this? Xiaoyu, do you know how I can break my fate after I find the person who broke my fate? Yushu shook her head hesitantly, and the uneasiness in her heart grew. Jing Qin stared at her. His eyes were as clear as spring water. It seemed that they had never changed, but it also seemed that no one had ever seen them clearly. I want to marry the person who broke my fate and give birth to a child. Only then can I break my fate. Yushu held her breath, and her face became gloomy in the blink of an eye. After a moment of silence, she heard her slightly trembling voice, "Who is your person who broke your fate?" Jing Qin lowered his head as if it was difficult for him to speak, but he still said it. Chapter 486. Added chapter. Dedicated to the leader of Zihue Zhokyu, a chapter full of flowers and hugs. For the sake of Guogua staying up late, you are not allowed to jump and read it. Do you hear me? Read it word by word for me. When Yushu heard Jing Qin telling her about the method to destroy a person's life, she had a vague suspicion. However, when she really heard the answer, she still found it hard to accept. It's you. These were the most sarcastic words she had ever heard. She stared at Jing Qin's face, trying to find a trace of a joke on his face. However, his expression was full of guilt and regret, which made her heart sink little by little. Are you kidding me? How could I be the person who destroyed your life? If it was me, then why didn't you notice when I was with you for so long? She asked with a stiff face. Jing Qin looked up at her with a faint gaze. It's really you, Xiaoyu. You know I never lie. This is a matter of life and death. If I'm not very sure, why would I say it so easily? There's no mistake. I saw your appearance in the yellow spring in the earthly altar of the Emperor's mausoleum with my own eyes. This is the only way to identify a person who destroyed a life. How can it be wrong? Suddenly, she remembered the sudden storm on the day of the ancestral worship. Yushu finally could not help but take a deep breath. Her fingers tightened on the windowsill and her face turned green. She had no choice but to believe what he said. She was the person who destroyed Jing Qin's life, but it was really her. This was really a big joke. Just 3 months ago, his childhood sweetheart junior sister had wanted to kill her in order to sever their relationship, regardless of whether she was innocent or not. Just 2 months ago, the man in front of her had disregarded the friendship between them for the sake of morality, and had righteously severed ties with her. In the blink of an eye, she had become the person who ruined his life. He had turned around and said that he wanted to be her husband and wife. He had even given her a huge reason to not allow her to reject him. Moreover, it seemed that she was the only one who clearly remembered all those heartless actions. Xiaoyu. Jing Qin looked at Yushu's changing expression under the dim candlelight. He could not tell what she was thinking and could not help but feel nervous. However, after confessing the truth, he felt a little relieved. He took a step forward and said to her bitterly, "I've let you down before. You're right. I regret it now. Can you forgive me?" Forgive you? Yushu raised her voice. In this quiet attic, even the slight tremor in her voice could be heard. Why do you want to ask for my forgiveness? Just because I'm that bullshit life breaker? If I wasn't, would you still be standing here and saying this to me? I. Her straightforward questioning made Jing Qin speechless. He was not a person who was good at lying. In this situation, he did not even know how to find an excuse for himself. You won't. Yushu gritted her teeth. The veins on her forehead were bulging. She said the pale truth for him, if I wasn't the life breaker, you wouldn't care whether I would forgive you or not. For you, the important thing is who the life breaker is, not who I, Yushu, am. The name life breaker hid a heavy meaning behind it. It was like a huge mountain hanging over her head without any defense. As long as she thought about it deeply, Yushu's hair stood on end. Why was Jing Qin intercepted on his way to the capital? Why was he buried with silver needles and abandoned in the river? Why was the person who was hanged on the observatory not long ago? Why was there a note pointing at Jing Qin? Why was there a plot against Jing Qin? She was confused for a while. Now there was an explanation. Because he was a great disaster. His existence affected the fate of this country. And the existence of the life breaker was related to his fate. She had become the most crucial point and also the most fatal point. She coldly looked at Jing Qin, who was at a loss but unable to explain himself. She harbored a glimmer of hope and asked in a low voice, "Who did you tell about me being the one who broke your life?" The Emperor also knows about it. Seeing that Yushu's face turned pale, Jing Qin didn't dare to say more. Yushu held a cold breath and said with difficulty, "Let me ask you, have you ever thought that those who secretly hurt you wanted to hurt you because they knew you were a great disaster? Have you ever thought about why Chao Yuling was killed? She used to be a top actuary in a company. She could accurately estimate the risks involved in an insurance company. The person who plotted against Jing Chen undoubtedly had the intention of rebelling. And he was lurking in Anling City. He was so powerful that he could know the secret of the great disaster. He hid so deeply that even the royal family couldn't do anything about it. There was such a hidden force who wanted to overthrow the imperial court and had infinite killing intent. If they knew her existence, she would be in great danger. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if she could keep her life, she would not be able to control her life in the future. For that **T righteousness of the country, she had to marry Jing Chen and bear his children. What about Shui Rui? He was the man who moved her heart endlessly, the man who knew and understood her. Was she going to let his sincerity down? Yushu couldn't help but think of that night. Shui Rui stared at her with his dark eyes. Such a cunning and smart man respected and cherished her. Even when he hugged her, he was cautious and careful. He had seen her good and bad, insidiousness and selfishness, but he still loved her. The sound of his heartbeat still echoed in her ears. How could she give up? Yushu had a hard time calming down as she thought about all the difficulties she was going to face. Her remaining rationality told her that Jing Chen had his own difficulties and that he had no choice. She shouldn't hold a grudge against him. However, the reality in front of her told her that the man in front of her, who she had once risked her life to accompany, could abandon her because of a few lies in the past. Now, for the sake of the country, he could push her into the teeth of the storm. She asked Jing Chen like this to see if he did it knowingly or just foolishly. She admitted that she couldn't be cruel to Jing Chen. After all, he was the first man who was willing to sacrifice his life for her. How could she just let him go and not care about him at all? If he was foolishly put her in such a dangerous situation, she could convince herself not to hate him for the sake of their past relationship. But if he did it knowingly, then she would never be soft-hearted. Jing Chen fell silent. He looked at Yushu's aggressive eyes. He seemed to be able to sense the anger and uneasiness that was emitted from her body because of him. For the first 10 years of his life he had lived a life of lies. He had long been used to the arrangement of fate. When he first found out the truth, he also felt anger. But after the anger subsided, he still couldn't forget the fate that he was carrying. That was the mark that he was born with. Unless he died, it would always be there. He couldn't throw it away. He couldn't bear to hate it. Because his life existed because of this. Thinking like this, his eyes that were so clear that people could see the bottom of his heart gradually darkened. It was as if the dust that was buried in his heart had floated to the surface. Miss Chow died because of me. The culprit hiding in the dark should know that I am the great calamity. He also knows that I am looking for the fate breaker. So he wants to act from my side. He wants to strangle the fate breaker in the cradle before I break the fate breaker. However, you don't have to be afraid. I've discussed it with Big Tipping. We won't reveal the fact that you're the life breaker. We've already found a substitute for you. Before we find out who's behind this, you won't be in any danger. Jing Chen's voice carried a hint of tiredness. After he finished speaking, he quietly looked at Yushu, waiting for her reaction. Only his white fingers under his sleeves revealed his nervousness. And right now, because of his words, Yushu's face was filled with frost and disappointment. He knew that it was not that he did not understand. But he still chose to push her out, regardless of whether she was willing or not. Yushu's fingers scratched the windowsill behind her, but she didn't notice it. Only her little finger, which was broken because of him, could not be used to this day, but it gave off a stinging pain like ants biting it. When she thought that her fate in the future would be controlled by others because of the 3 words, fate breaker, and it was the person in front of her who personally pushed her onto this path, how could she, who was proud and arrogant, accept it? Her throat felt as if there was a mouthful of pus and blood. If she swallowed it back, she was afraid that a tumor would grow in her heart. The endurance and unwillingness that she had been suppressing for Jing Chen after he recovered his memory finally erupted. Jing Chen, I don't think I have done anything wrong to you. I can give up this life for you because I thought you were worth it. But now, do you think you are worth it? Yushu couldn't suppress her anger and roared. In her previous life, she had died in a hurry and died without a cause. She deserved it. But in this life, she was able to keep her life. She cherished her life more than anyone else. She struggled to live until now for herself, not for anyone else. Why did he decide for her? Why did he think that she would understand? Why did he think that she should be that damned fate breaker? The rise and fall of the Dan dynasty, the lives of his sect elders, what did they have to do with her? Jing Chen was stung by the aggressive look of Yushu. He did not know how many times he had seen her coldly frowning at others. But he never thought that one day that person would be him. In this embarrassing situation, his mind wandered. He easily recalled the days when he lost his memory. That smiling face that looked at him all day, and that kiss that gently fell on his cheek in the forest. That lively and moving Xiaoyu, because of his betrayal, had become so cold. "I have done wrong to you." His voice became hoarse. He still could not find a word to explain his difficulties. The only thing he could do was not to deceive her. "Xiaoyu, I know that you no longer have any feelings for me. If I want you to marry me and have children with me, you will find it hard to accept. Don't worry, I will not force you. I will be good to you in the future, very very good to you. I will let you fall in love with me again and be willing to be a couple with me. I will protect you for a lifetime and will not let anyone hurt you." The promise he made sounded so ridiculous to Yushu. It was not that he had not said the same words before. But later, when he was faced with a choice, the person he let go of was her. Although she was extremely angry, she surprisingly calmed down. After taking a few breaths, she swallowed the ridicule that was about to come out of her mouth. Fall in love with him again? Impossible. She understood herself better than anyone else. She was a stubborn person. She would not shed tears until she saw the coffin, and would not turn back until she hit the wall. If it was not for the fact that Shui Rui would let her down in the future, even if Jing Chen twisted his head off for her to kick as a ball, she would not fall in love with him. Even if Shui Rui let her down, she would not go back to him. Yushu did not speak about Shui Rui out of impulse. Jing Chen could disregard her life and death for the sake of righteousness, but she could not use the person she loved as a shield because of selfishness. Moreover, this situation was very important. Even if it was Shui Rui, it was impossible for him to shake the emperor's heart. In this world, the emperor was the most powerful. For his family and country, he could turn anyone who stood in his way into a pile of bones. "You should give up. If you want me to be your husband and wife, you might as well ask me to die. You can hold my urn and go to the heaven and earth to get married. Let's see if you can break your life," Yushu said coldly. She would not pretend to be subservient to Jing Chen just because her life was in someone else's hands. Although Jing Chen had placed the matter of breaking his life at the forefront, his guilt towards her was the biggest trump card in her hand. When she could stand on an objective point of view and look at this person, she had nothing to be afraid of. As long as she had a sense of propriety, she could completely make use of his guilt. "Xiaoyu, don't say things out of anger. You won't die. I won't force you. I can wait until the day you change your mind." Her words stabbed at Jing Chen's heart. In addition to sadness and regret, there was also heartache. This cold-looking girl in front of him had suffered a lot for him. However, after he recovered his memory, everything he did made her sad. "Ha!" Yushu sneered. She closed the window behind her and picked up the candlestick on the coffee table. When she walked past him, she paused for a moment. She tilted her head and thought of a question. It did not take long for her to ask. "You said that you found a substitute for me. Is it that Zhan Shuiyuan?" "Yes." Jing Chen knew that Yushu had always been smart. He only said one thing and she could guess two or three things. After confirming that Zhan Shuiyuan had become a target for her, Yushu did not feel very happy. On one hand, she was secretly glad that they knew to cover up for her. On the other hand, she felt a little sad. She hated Zhan Shuiyuan, who was arrogant and proud. She had never thought of letting him take a knife for her. However, she did not have the final say. She was in deep trouble. She could not even protect herself, so how could she care about others? As the saying goes, a dead friend does not have to die. At most, she did not want the 3 slaps and did not set a trap for Zhan Shuiyuan. She could not do anything else. There were still many questions in Yushu's mind, but she did not ask them all at once tonight. She carefully protected the candle in her hand and planned what to do next. She ignored Jing Chen's hesitation and went downstairs without looking back, leaving him in the dark. Jing Chen stood in the same place and only turned his head to watch her leave. He did not stop her, nor did he chase after her. Listening to her footsteps, he thought back to her question just now. "Do you think you are worth it?" Chapter 487. When Yushu left the small building, she did not go back to the observatory. She crossed the lawn and found Xen Lu, who was observing the stone tablet. She greeted him and said that she had a headache and wanted to leave. Xen Lu was about to slip away, so he simply left with her. The two of them returned to the female dormitory. Yushu did not speak the entire way. Xen Lu chattered incessantly. Seeing her dark expression, he thought that she was uncomfortable and did not care. As soon as they entered the room, Yushu sat tiredly on the chair, one hand covering her forehead. After an unknown amount of time, the anger in her heart subsided, leaving behind only sorrow. Towards Jing Chen she had never been willing to be too harsh. Even after he recovered his memory, he broke his promise with her time and time again. Even when, under Shui Yun's pressure, he cruelly cut off all contact with her. Even when, in his heart, she was a burden that he could let go of at any time. She did not feel any resentment. Because of the friendship between the two of them he did not care, but she was. However, Jing Chen's actions today truly made her heart bitterly disappointed. He clearly knew that it was a pit of fire, but he still pushed her to jump in. If the two of them had a deep hatred or if they had never met before, it would have been fine. But she was not. Yushu had never done anything wrong to Jing Chen. When he fell into the river, she risked her life to save him. When he was heavily injured, she brewed medicine every day. When he could not speak, when he lost his martial arts, she did her best to take care of him. When he lost his memory, she did everything she could to help him recover. When he disappeared without a word, she ran around in the heavy snow. When he spoke of the difficulties of his life, she was worried and anxious for him. When his life was revealed, even if her fingers were twisted and broken, she would not reveal half a word about him. But what about him? He sold her out with just an apology and made her take on a responsibility that didn't belong to her. If she hadn't put on an act to trick him tonight, she probably wouldn't have known what was going on until she died. He had wronged her like this. Why should she care about the friendship that had already passed away? Yushu laughed coldly, mocking herself. That day when they met in Yang City, they actually got to know each other in 3 months in Jiangnan. How could she have thought that she would end up in such a situation where you are heartless and I am unjust? She covered her face with one hand and sat on a chair in front of the hall, listening to the sound of summer cicadas outside the window. She sat there for the whole night. She waited until the rays of morning light peeked through the crack of the door and window before she slowly put down her stiff arm. She pressed on the armrest and propped herself up. With slow but steady steps, she walked into the inner room. Zhan family guesthouse Pipa. Zhan Shuiyuan waved his arm, causing a set of green porcelain cups on the coffee table to fall to the ground. Panting, he gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Despicable and shameless. She acted presumptuously in Tibet, but I didn't hold it against her. She didn't know what was good for her, and even dared to speak ill of me behind my back, causing me to be unable to go to the library these few days, and almost delayed my examination. She even dared to seduce academician Jing behind my back. How shameless." Chui Yun hurriedly took a few steps back to avoid being pricked by the debris. She carefully looked at Zhan Shuiyuan's angry face and added fuel to the fire. "Isn't that so? You weren't there last night. I saw her talking and laughing with academician Jing with my own eyes, and then she led people downstairs. I didn't dare to follow them, but I saw the two of them enter the small building one after the other from the observatory. They stayed there for a long time before coming out. I really don't know what kind of shady business they did inside." "Shut up." Zhan Shuiyuan angrily slapped the coffee table, reached out to point at Chui Yun's nose, and turned the spearhead around. "It's all your fault, it's all your fault. If you didn't steal my Tianyu and make me think that she did it, would I have let her slap me for nothing? It's all your fault. I hate you. If there's a problem with my examination this time, you'll be the first one who won't forgive me." Chui Yun embarrassedly lowered her head. She didn't dare to provoke her anymore, so she could only choose to say something pleasant. "Shuiyun, it's all my fault. Don't be angry with me. Calm down and prepare well today. Tomorrow you will take the examination of the Celestial Commissioner. When you become a female official of the Imperial Counselor, you will be in charge of the affairs in your hands. You don't need to be afraid of that powerless woman anymore. Also, I asked someone to inquire that Yushu used to be from the family of the former Right Magistrate. Later, when the Ji family was defeated, her mother secretly ran away. I don't know how many scandals there are behind her. You can check her household card and reveal these things. Let's see if she can still be arrogant then." Although Zhan Shuiyuan was still angry, her eyes obviously brightened a little. "Are you serious?" Chui Yun nodded. "I heard it from the little sister who used to be good friends with Ji Xingxuan. It can't be wrong." Zhan Shuiyuan sneered and said, "It's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. I will let that shameless thing know that I'm not easy to bully. She hit me, I will return it to her tenfold." Chui Yun responded on the side and coaxed Zhan Shuiyuan back with a few words. Seeing that there was nothing else, she made an excuse to leave. After leaving the Zhan family's villa, Chui Yun sat on a sedan chair at the east gate and carried it all the way to the small door of a big mansion in the north of the city. When the old maid guarding the door saw her, she didn't shy away and opened the door with a smile. Chui Yun asked, Is the princess in the mansion now? Yes, the second young lady is also here. The second young lady mentioned by the old maid was not the second young lady of the Xiang prince's mansion, but the second young lady of the Chui family, Chui Xn, who drank milk with the princess since childhood. Chui Yun secretly curled her lips. Originally, she wanted to be alone in front of the princess, so she deliberately chose this time to come. Who knew that her elder sister was also here? Shiwen was wrapped in a beautiful blue pearl gauze as she sat crookedly in the waterside pavilion. Her small hand, which was dyed pink with nail polish, held the beauty fan and slowly waved it. Beside her sat a slender and beautiful woman. Her eyes were soft and gentle, and she looked older than Shiwen by a year and a half. At this moment she was carefully peeling a green grape, using a silver skewer to pick out the seeds before feeding it to Shiwen. Her eyes were gentle and indulgent. Miss Chui is here. The maid reported from outside the curtain. Shiwen turned her head and looked at Chui Yun, who was walking along the waterside. She smiled and said to Chui Xn, Sister Xn, guess whether this is good news or bad news. Chui Xn took a handkerchief and slowly pressed the grape juice at the corner of Shiwen's mouth. She looked up at the figure on the shore and said, she wouldn't dare to come if she can't do what you asked her to do. As she spoke, Chui Yun entered the waterside pavilion. She first kowtowed to Shiwen and then gave her elder sister a flattering smile. Princess, elder sister. Tell me, how is it? Shiwen looked at the flattering Chui Yun and felt a little annoyed. If it wasn't because she couldn't find someone to use, she wouldn't have picked such a sly person. She even messed up the matter of Hua Jinyuan. If it wasn't because she still had some use, she wouldn't have allowed such a person to be in front of her. Chui Yun looked at Shiwen impatiently and didn't dare to keep her in suspense. Today I learned all the words to Zhan Shuiyun. When she takes office in Taiching department, she will definitely not let Yu Xuanzi have an easy time. Chui Xian said, Yu Xuanzi is not very fierce. Miss Zhan suffered a great loss in his hands. She was beaten and scolded. Isn't she afraid at all? She will listen to whatever you say. She doesn't learn from her mistakes. Isn't she a little stupid? Shiwen also looked at Chui Yun with a little worry. Chui Yun hurriedly said, it's not like that. It's also a coincidence. Last night, Academician Jing of Taisher Book Garden was substituting for Academician Sima. I happened to see Academician Jing and Yu Xuanzi on the observatory, so I added oil to the fire and told Zhan Shuiyuan. Princess, you may not know, but Zhan Shuiyuan admires Academician Jing very much. When she heard this, she was very angry. How could she care about that witch? She can't wait to pull her face now. Shiwen burst into laughter. She raised her long neck and patted her thigh with a round fan, saying, if she really dares to pull Yu Lianfang's face, I will treat her to a banquet. Chui Yun was puzzled. Although she listened to Princess Shiwen's words and made trouble for Yu Shu, she didn't know what happened between them. Was it worth being so happy? Chui Xn held her hand and said to Chui Yun, this witch doesn't know how to behave. She has offended Princess several times. Relying on a little bit of human relations, she is arrogant. Princess can't teach her a lesson. You ruined Princess's arrangement in Huajin Garden. This time you can be considered to have redeemed yourself. Princess said that she will give you an invitation to the Hibiscus Gentleman's banquet as a reward for being sensible. Hearing this, Chui Yun hid her excitement and bowed her head, saying, thank you, Princess. In the future, Yun Yun will do everything that Princess asks me to do. Looking at her humble appearance, Shiwen's eyes flashed with disdain. So what if she could enter the court and become an official? In front of her, she still had to be like a dog waiting for her reward. Chui Xn sent Chui Yun away and poured a cup of warm plum tea for Shiwen. Looking at Shiwen's changing expression, she said with pity, you don't have to worry. At the Hibiscus Gentleman's banquet, I will help you keep an eye on those dishonest ones and make sure they don't cause trouble for you. Shiwen lay on her knees and covered her face with a fan. She said in a low voice, sister, you don't know? I will be 16 this year. Father is delaying my marriage. Seeing that His Majesty is about to be dissatisfied, Mother said that the palace intends to marry me to the northeast to appease the Prince of Dongjing, Jiang Huaying. This year's Hibiscus Gentleman's banquet is my last chance. If I don't take the risk, I will have no choice in the future. Chui Xn touched her hair. Her eyes were strange and she said worriedly, Your Grace, do you really not want to discuss it with the princess? You should at least let the eldest young master know. After all, you are a woman. If one day you send the golden jade hibiscus to him and he rejects you, you will not even have the last chance. Shiwen was silent for a while. Her voice came from under the fan. If I tell him, I'm afraid he won't even go to the banquet. It doesn't matter. I know he doesn't like the marriage with the count. It was grandfather who forced him. Don't worry. Since I have decided to do this, I naturally have a way to make it impossible for him to reject me. Chapter 488. Yu Shu slept in the female dormitory for half a day. When she woke up in the afternoon, it started raining again. The stuffy heat of the previous day was swept away, and the air was cool. After closing the doors and windows, she left Taisher Library with an umbrella. Yesterday she told Lu Zhong that she did not need to pick her up. At this time there was no sedan chair to hire on the street. Walking on the wet street, the anxiety in her heart dissipated step by step. The more one was in prison, the more one could not panic. Being in the situation, Yu Shu spent a night thinking about what she should do next to get rid of the responsibility and danger brought by the new identity of Life Breaker. At first glance she only had two ways to go. The first way was to resign to fate and obediently marry Jing Chen and have children, becoming a stone brick for the prosperity of the Da and dynasty. Then she would live a seemingly harmonious life with a man she resented. When the day came for her to retire, she would let others decide whether she would continue to be rich and powerful, or become a good lackey. When all the birds were gone and the cunning rabbit was dead, she would be cooked or hidden. The second way was to refuse to comply with the feudal superstition and arranged marriage. Then she would be regarded as refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. They would then tie her up and force her to marry Jing Chen. From then on she would live a life of imprisonment. Until Jing Chen lost his life, what awaited her was either to be silenced or to continue to be imprisoned. In other words, with the title Life Breaker on her head, whether she cooperated or not, the rest of her life was destined to be a tragedy. Jing Chen, have you ever stood in my position and thought that this Life Breaker is actually a person who is seeking death? Yu Shu walked alone on the road and the sound of the rain covered her words. The great calamity, your life is tied to the rise and fall of a dynasty. Knowing such a huge secret, when I'm no longer of use, will they let me live? At that time, if they find a dignified reason to have you personally kill me, I'm afraid you'll do it. To put it bluntly, Jing Chen was like a treasure that could shake the foundation of a country, and she was the key to the door of the treasure. Without her, this treasure could not be opened. However, when someone opened the door with the key and took the treasure out, the treasure would still be a treasure and she, the key, would become a waste. Yu Shu clenched the handle of the umbrella, and her face became colder. She raised her eyes and quickly glanced around. If she remembered correctly, the passerby in a gray robe on the opposite side of the street had been following her from the gate of Taisher Library. There was also the hawker who was pushing his cart home not far away. He had not left her sight. Before yesterday she would not have paid attention to these details. Now, it seemed that someone was secretly watching her in case she had an accident before Jing Chen lost his life. Yu Shu's eyes flashed and a sneer appeared at the corner of her mouth. It took her a night to confirm this important point. Before the treasure was opened, she could not lose this key. The wonderful thing was that in the current situation, there was a group of people with bad intentions secretly watching Jing Chen, the day, and disaster, and they wanted to ruin it. In order to kill these rebels, the ruler of the country would temporarily hide her, the key. First, they would not use it, and second, they would protect her well. In other words, now she was supported by the emperor. There were advantages and disadvantages, and blessings and misfortunes were interdependent. Yu Shu knew the trump card in her hand. If she wanted to break out of the situation, she had to first find out what the problem was, and then she could take the right medicine. What she could do now was to find out the secret behind Jing Chen, the troublemaker, by taking advantage of the situation. It sounded incredible that a person's life could decide the fate of the country. The death and disaster, the person who broke one's life, and the absurd way to break it. Where did these words come from, and how could the ruler of the country believe it? She thought about it all night, and this was the problem. From the north of the city to the south, Yu Shu walked a long way. An umbrella could not block the wind and rain. When she returned home in the evening, half of her body was wet. Yun Do moved a small stool and sat under the door to wait. Seeing her drenched appearance, she hurriedly shook off the cloak in her hands and went forward to wrap her up. She held up the umbrella and pushed her to the backyard. Lu Zhong went out to pick up the girl. Didn't you see him? Why did you come back in the rain? Quickly go inside, what if you catch a cold? When Yu Shu heard the little maidservants muttering, she didn't find her annoying. Instead, she cooperated and entered the house. She took off her wet clothes and climbed onto the bed. She covered herself with a thin blanket and quietly watched as the maidservant busied herself in front of her. One moment she brought hot water for her, and the next moment she used a towel to dry her hair. When Zhao Hui heard that Yu Shu came back wet, she left Yi Xiaochuan with the wet nurse and had Madame Chen instruct the kitchen to cook some hot soup. She crossed the courtyard to Yu Shu's room and saw her lying on the bed in a daze. She hurriedly walked to her side and touched her wet hair. "Why are you drenched like this? Didn't I call Lu Zhong to pick you up? You're also a child. Seeing that the rain is getting heavier, you can't find a place to hide and come back when the rain is lighter. You must have caught a cold. Look at how white your little face is." Zhao Hui used her hands to hold her ice-cold face. She sensitively sensed that this child had something on her mind. Just as she was wondering what had happened, Yu Shu hugged her waist and buried her head in her embrace. "Mother." When Zhao Hui heard her muffled voice, she was stunned for a moment. She hugged her back and responded with an AI. She felt a bit sour and uncomfortable in her heart. She thought that this child was naturally strong-willed. As a girl, she had been supporting the facade outside and had never complained about being tired or bitter. How much grievance must she have suffered for her to be willing to show a bit of weakness in front of her? Yu Shu hugged Zhao Hui and smelled the milky fragrance on her body. She absent-mindedly thought of her previous life. When she was a child, she couldn't remember clearly. But when she grew up and had her own opinions, it seemed that she had never been so intimate with her parents. Instead, she always saw her younger brother acting like a spoiled child to her parents, crying and being comforted in her mother's arms. Later, the person who took care of and comforted her younger brother became her. "Xiao Yu ah," Zhao Hui patted her back and said softly, "If you have encountered something sad, tell Mother. Mother can't help you solve your problems, but at least I can listen to your heart." Yu Shu breathed in the strong smell of her mother on Zhao Hui's body. Although it was a bit more comforting, she couldn't help but want to pour out her heart. But she didn't forget the severity of Jing Chen's matter. If it was leaked, whoever heard it would be harmed. "I just feel bad in my heart, that's all." She raised her head from Zhao Hui's arms. "I want to eat the small wonton stew you cooked, is that okay?" When Zhao Hui heard that she wanted to eat it, how could she not agree? She immediately said yes. "There is still raw meat in the kitchen. I just made some chicken soup at noon. I will go to the kitchen to make the stuffing." After saying that, she let go of her and quickly went to the kitchen to prepare. Yu Shu slept for a day and walked all the way. Her stomach was already growling, but she didn't have much of an appetite. She wrapped herself in the quilt and lay on the bed in a daze. Yun Do came in from outside and gently called her a few times. She didn't respond, thinking that she was asleep. When she walked closer, she found that her eyes were open. Miss? Yu Shu listlessly turned her eyes. Yun Do picked up the clothes at the head of the bed and said to her, "Mr. Shui is here. Quickly put on your clothes and get up. I don't know what it is." Yu Shu suddenly sat up and looked at the sky outside the window. It was clearly still raining outside. She didn't expect Shui Rui to come at this time. She was happy and worried at the same time. Happy because she wanted to see him at this time, worried because she didn't know what to say when she saw him. "Where are my shoes?" Yu Shu turned over and got off the bed. No matter what, she couldn't hide from him. Yun Do brought a clean dress for her to change into. Because her hair was still wet, she tied it into a bun at the back of her head and used a long pearl hairpin to twist it. Half of her long hair hung down to her waist. Dressed in plain clothes, she went to the front to meet the guest. Entering under the eaves, Yun Do closed the umbrella. Yu Shu lifted the hem of her dress and put it down. When she looked up, she saw the room was brightly lit. Shui Rui was sitting in the light, holding a cup of tea in his hand. He was wearing a round neck robe made of willow satin, which made his figure look tall and slender. His black hair was neatly tied at the back of his head, revealing his square forehead. A pair of bright peach blossom eyes stared at her from the moment she walked out of the door. Probably because it was dark and there was no one else around, his gaze was not reserved. Yu Shu's eyes flickered a little. She turned her head and called Yun Do to guard the corridor, then walked in. "It's raining, why did you come here?" It had been another 3 or 4 days since their last small gathering at Wangji Lu. The documents of the judicial office have been sorted out and submitted in the afternoon. "I returned to the Fu." Shui Rui paused and looked at Yu Shu sitting down opposite him. He lowered his voice and said, "I missed you, so I came." The two of them had an intimate moment on the rooftop that night, and both Shui Rui and Yu Shu felt that they had taken a step closer to each other from the bottom of their hearts. There was a saying that a day apart felt like 3 years. When Yu Shu heard Shui Rui's straightforward words of love, it would be a lie to say that she was not happy. She had just discovered not long ago that Shui Rui, who was smooth and sophisticated in dealing with people, was quite frank in terms of feelings. For example, now, if he missed her, he would come to see her. He did not mind telling her. He would not put on an act and deliberately put on a high profile in front of her. Looking at Shui Rui like this, how could Yushu not be angry at the identity of the person who broke her life? She had to let go of such a considerate and tactful man to marry and have children with an enemy. Wasn't this digging out her heart? Big brother, have you eaten dinner? Yushu opened her mouth and asked dryly. She really did not think about whether she should tell Shui Rui about Jing Chen. To be honest, she was a little timid. She did not have much confidence. If Shui Rui knew that there was such a big mountain on top of her head, and if he wanted to achieve good things with her, he would have to go against the emperor and even abandon the peace and prosperity. Would he still choose to stand with her? It was not her fault that she was not confident. In her opinion, how much you gave, how much you could get. She had been extremely benevolent to Jing Chen. They had been through life and death together. That person could use her to achieve righteousness. What about Shui Rui? What had she done for Shui Rui? When she looked back and thought about it, it had always been Shui Rui who had been helping her all along, and he'd done a great deal for her in silence. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was always at her beck and call, yet before she had the chance to treat him well, such a mishap had occurred. Last night, she asked Jing Chen if he was worth her to break her life for him. Today, she also wanted to ask herself, was she worth Shui Rui taking the risk to go against the court for her? She actually had an answer in her heart. Yushu's eyes turned gray. Her heart was sour and bitter, but she also felt helpless. Why did she feel that Shui Rui should bear the crime of treason with her for her own selfishness? If she also put Shui Rui in a dilemma, what was the difference between it and what Jing Chen had done to her? Shu, why don't you say anything? Are you tired? Oh, I stayed up late last night and watched the stars in the Taisha Shuyuan. I didn't sleep well during the day. Yushu pretended to rub her eyes to prevent him from seeing any clues. Then she said, Godmother cooked wontons herself. Stay and eat with us. Shui Rui said with a smile, I still remember Aunt Huai's wonton noodles. At that time in Yang City I brought you to try it. Yes, I also remember at that time. Shui Rui changed the topic and looked at Yushu, who was chattering endlessly. Doubt flashed in his eyes. Seeing that she was a little strange today, it seemed that she had encountered something difficult, but it was not convenient to tell him. Chapter 489. The rain didn't stop until the evening. Yushu sent Shui Rui out of the gate. Big brother, go back. Be careful at night. Shui Rui turned back to look at the thin and slender Yushu standing on the steps. He couldn't describe what was wrong with her, but he couldn't put his mind at ease. He looked up and saw that there was no one else in the gatehouse, only a little servant girl. He stepped aside, using his body as a cover, and raised his hand to grab her soft hair. His palm came into contact with the coldness, which made him frown inwardly. He squeezed her tightly and said in a low voice, If you have nothing to do tomorrow, come to Wangji Tower. In the end, it was not convenient to talk at her home. He had to ask her tomorrow. Yushu looked up at him and saw the concern in his eyes. She pursed her lips and said with a light smile, Then in the afternoon. I have to go to Assistant Minister Chio's Fu in the morning. Okay, I'll wait for you. Shui Rui nodded but didn't let go of her hand. He just stood there and said, Last time you said you wanted to go out to play. Pick another day. I see that your red horse is quite spirited. It's just that it always doesn't run. He said something unimportant as his warm and thick palm wrapped around the back of her hand. He rubbed it for a while until her fingers were warm again. Only then did he end the conversation. I'm leaving. Don't stay up late to read. Rest early. Yushu watched as Shui Rui boarded the carriage. She slowly retracted her warm hand into her sleeve. Her heart missed the moment of his warmth. Her gaze followed the carriage into the distance until it disappeared at the corner of the street. She was still staring into the distance in a daze. Miss, the wind is rising. Go back to your room. Yun Do called from behind her. Yushu turned around. There was no hesitation in her eyes. She thought, it won't be too late to tell him after I thoroughly investigate this matter. As soon as Shui Rui returned to the Fu, he heard the servant say that Shui Lingnan was looking for him. Shui Rui thought there was something urgent, so he hurried to the small study in the north yard without even changing his clothes. All the way to the door, he did not see a single servant. Shui Rui's footsteps slowed down, and he heard a few low coughs coming from the half-closed door. He stopped in his tracks and did not make a sound until the coughs disappeared. Grandfather, I'm back. Is it Qing Bai? Come in and talk. Shui Rui pushed open the door and entered. As soon as he turned around, he saw Shui Lingnan had a dark green cloak draped over his shoulders, and his back was straight as he sat by himself on the recliner under the bookshelf. A thin blanket covered his knees, and he held a few yellow booklets in his hand. I heard from Hadaku that you came back in the afternoon. Where did you go? Shui Lingnan raised his head and asked. Facing his grandson, whom he had raised since childhood, he still maintained a dignified expression. I went to visit a friend and stayed for supper. Shui Rui walked over and looked behind him. He hesitated for a moment before he walked forward and closed the wide-open window. Then he turned around and retreated in front of the old man. Grandfather, did something big happen? Shui Lingnan had seen his actions. Under the dim light of the lamp, his aged face was expressionless. In the morning court today, someone took the lead in bringing up the matter of appointing a successor and submitted a memorial. Shui Rui asked in surprise, who submitted it? He was a fifth-rank official and did not have to attend court every day. Recently, he had been busy revising laws and documents. He had just been released in the afternoon, so he had not heard of the morning court. Your second uncle's father-in-law, the Celestial Commissioner, left Judge Xin. Shui Rui's second aunt was from the Xin family, one of the 12 prefectures in Jing. The current left Judge Xin was Minister Shui's in-law. It wasn't that no one had brought up the matter of appointing a successor, but the emperor was physically strong and the matter was always left unsettled. There had been no movement in recent years. Now that the princes had come of age, it was inevitable that some people would start thinking about it. Of the princes who had come of age, Ning Wang Lu Hao, born by Yin Shufei, and Jin Wang Lu Tan, born by noble consort Shui, were the hottest topic. Originally, Lu Tan had been recuperating in the mountains for many years and had not returned, so his influence was not as great as Lu Hao's. But 2 months ago, Lu Tan had defeated Lu Hao at the Shuangyang conference and received the title of Jin Wang, becoming the youngest marquis. With Shui Lingnan, the minister of the 6 departments, as his maternal grandfather, and the emperor also bestowed a marriage to the southern Xiajiang family, Lu Tan's influence was gradually catching up to Lu Hao's. Shui Rui's eyelids jumped. Looking at Shui Lingnan's cold face, he knew that the matter of appointing a successor was not his grandfather's idea. There was more to it than meets the eye. So he asked, has left adjudicator Xin recommended a candidate? Shui Lingnan only shook his head and looked at him. Shui Rui thought for a while and said, His Majesty had just returned from the day of worshipping the ancestors in Huajin Garden. His body was unwell and he had been bedridden for a few days. He had just recovered, but today someone proposed to appoint a successor. His Majesty will definitely be unhappy. Although left adjudicator Xin did not specifically recommend Jin Wang, but he and our Fu are in-laws. Others will definitely guess that it was us. If His Majesty is angry, it is impossible that he would not be suspicious of grandfather. For such a big matter, left adjudicator Xin did not discuss it with grandfather. I don't know if he was muddled or instigated by someone. He did not say everything and did not point out who instigated Xin, but in his heart he was very sure that this matter had something to do with Ning Wang's faction. Shui Lingnan looked at the child he had raised with satisfaction. He handed over the memorial that he had been holding in his hands for a long time and sneered, saying, You don't need to help exonerate your second uncle's family. Xin is a short-sighted person. His old father, old academician Xin, is an intelligent person. It is a pity that he is old and retired early, not meddling in other people's business. If it wasn't for the imperial edict that year, I would not have allowed your second uncle to marry this noble girl. Let me ask you, a while ago, did your second aunt look for you in private, intending to match you with the 6th young miss of the Xin family? Knowing that nothing in this Fu could be hidden from the old man in front of him, Shui Rui lowered his head and said, Second aunt did have such intentions but grandson rejected her. Shui Lingnan said, That was also Xin's idea. He was testing this old man, thinking that by marriage your cousin Jing Wang will be able to achieve great things in the future, his Xin family will be more stable. Seeing that we do not have such intentions, he started to have other ideas. Your aunt sent out news from the palace that Xu Fei seems to be dissatisfied with the current Ning Wang Fei and wants to find a side Fei for Ning Wang. Among the candidates that she has her eyes on, the young miss of the Xin family is among them. This old man thinks that Ning Wang must have promised the Xin family something, that Xin dared to pretend to be a fool and stab the Shui family in the imperial court today. Shui Rui's eyes flashed. Only now did he understand why Xin's Wasi had made a mistake. He opened the memorials that Shui Lingnan handed to him and quickly flipped through them. He saw that they were all articles praising Lu Tan. Some of them were exaggerated and even he frowned when he read them. It could be imagined that when the emperor saw these memorials, he wasn't happy that his son had surpassed his father, but he was angry that someone was coveting the position he was sitting on. "Grandfather, these memorials?" After the court session ended, the holy emperor sent me to the imperial study and threw them in front of me. Shuelingnan's face was expressionless. He didn't say more about the emperor's anger at the time and brushed it over. He looked at Shui Rui and waited for him to continue. Shui Rui thought for a bit and said, "There is no lack of people watching outside right now. It is not convenient for grandfather to invite Jing Wang over to the fu to prevent any unpleasant rumors from reaching the holy emperor's ears. I will go to Jing Wang now. Is there anything you want me to bring?" Shuelingnan nodded. Jing Wang is still young and can't control his temper. After this matter, the emperor will definitely find an excuse to reprimand him in a few days to suppress his limelight. You don't need to tell him in advance. It's a good thing to let him suffer a little. In addition, tell him about Xanye's scheme so that he will be more careful in the future. Grandson will remember. I will change my clothes and go out now. Shui Rui placed the few memorials on the tea table and touched the teapot in passing. He realized that the water inside the teapot had turned cold. When he turned his head and saw Shuelingnan's white hair and sunken and thin cheeks, he instantly felt as if something was stuck in his throat. "Grandfather, the tea is cold. I will get someone to change it before I leave." Shuelingnan, who was deep in thought, slowly raised his head and looked at the young man in front of him. His cloudy eyes revealed a complicated expression. He swallowed his cough and said in a low voice, "Your mother's illness acted up again during dinner. Don't disturb her rest for the next 2 days in case she sees you and causes trouble again." Shui Rui's arm that was holding the teapot stiffened. He tried his best to suppress the chill that crept up his spine. His nose wrinkled and half of his face turned away from the light. He said in a low voice, "I know. I won't go to the rear courtyard for the next few days." Shuelingnan sighed faintly and leaned on the recliner. He pulled the blanket to his waist and waved at him. Shui Rui silently left with the teapot until he retreated to the door. He closed the door of the small study with a backhand and instantly clenched his fists. The lantern hanging high under the eaves shone on his handsome face. At this moment, it was full of darkness and sarcasm. Shui Rui went to the guest house that night to see Lu Tan. He said something and brought Minister Shui's words to him. After the 4th watch, he left through the side door of the guest house. He did not return to the mansion but went to the Wangji Tower. The next day, Yu Shu deleted and added several paragraphs of the 8 characters of marriage that Xia Jiangmin had annotated last night. She copied it again and sent it to the assistant minister's mansion today. Mrs. Chiu took it in her hand and looked at it carefully. She saw that her annotations were accurate. Some of the words of good or bad luck matched with what she had heard before. For example, the mother of young Master Li was not kind. This annotation said that the elders were against each other and that it was not good for the family business. Moreover, the son of young Master Zhao had several maidservants. This annotation said that the peach blossoms were rotten and that it was not good for the children. Mrs. Chiu also noticed that the annotations were all aimed at the men, not the women. Finally, Yu Shu stamped her 2 seals at the end of the annotation. One was the Yishur seal and the other was the Swansea seal. Mrs. Chiu was secretly surprised but also convinced. She closed the annotation with great satisfaction. She gave a look to the maidservant beside her. When the maidservant went behind the gauze cabinet, she thanked Yu Shu. "Thank you for your trouble. The day before yesterday I got a pair of toys. I want to give them to you to play with." After a while, she saw the maidservant come out with a square plate. On it were 2 fist-sized golden pichio squatting. They raised their heads and raised their feet. They were shining with golden light and looked like living creatures. Yu Shu looked at the 2 lumps of pure gold. Regardless of the workmanship, they were worth 100 or 200 taels of silver. She was very surprised by Mrs. Chiu's heavy thanks and declined. "It's nothing. How can I let Madam spend more money?" Mrs. Chiu didn't mind. She said with a smile, "Lady, don't regard me as an outsider. This is what I should do. You should know that people like us go to the Day Exchange Hall to ask for a fortune stick. Not to mention the cost, we can't ask for it once or twice. How can you be so detailed and considerate?" Yu Shu saw that she didn't seem to have any ulterior motives. She also knew that Chiu Jiming, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works, was very rich and didn't care about this little bit. So she didn't refuse again. She took the 2 lumps of gold and chatted with Mrs. Chiu for a while before getting up to leave. Chapter 490. The hegemon is here again. Thank you for having a new hegemon, C_. Hug. When Shui Rui woke up, he was in the courtyard. The blanket on his body slipped to his feet. There was a wine pot next to his pillow and an open wine jar on the ground, reminding him how much he drank last night. He groaned and sat up, rubbing his forehead. He combed his messy long hair and squinted at the dazzling sunlight outside the courtyard. He called out, "Come in." Gui Ba, who was guarding outside the curtain, came in with a basin of water and a white cotton towel. Shui Rui wiped his face with cold water and felt more refreshed. He smelled the strong smell of alcohol on his body and thought that Yushu would come later. He frowned and said, "Prepare warm soup." Gui Ba said, "Why don't you have breakfast first?" "The kitchen is ready. I will serve it to you." Shui Rui waved his hand. "What time is it?" "Leave it for lunch." Gui Ba looked at his face and took the towel. He reported, "An hour ago Prince Yang's heir sent someone to book a table. He said that young Lord Rui and second young Master Qi would come at noon. What do you think?" Shui Rui raised his eyebrows. He put on his coat and asked, "How many?" "If Lu Jiong and the others came for a banquet, it must be a first-class banquet. The dishes and wine cups must be carefully arranged. They must first agree on the number of people to avoid a mess. I said to prepare 8 bowls and chopsticks." Shui Rui calculated that if they brought a few female guests, Shiwen would be missing. He suddenly had a headache. It wasn't that he didn't know how his cousin felt about him. At first he just thought that she was young and insensible, so he didn't care. But the last time she heard from somewhere that his grandfather intended to marry the Rui family, she came to Wang Jilu and said those words. It was hard not to take it to heart. What's more, he almost met Yushu that time. He really couldn't stop worrying. Fortunately, Yushu would come in the afternoon, so he could send this group of people away as soon as possible, lest Shiwen was crafty and targeted her again. Shui Rui wasn't afraid that Yushu would be at a disadvantage, but he was afraid that Shiwen would blabber and cause a misunderstanding. Shui Rui washed away the smell of alcohol and smoked a pot of sandalwood. He sat in the study tidily and flipped through an account book that Yushu had corrected a while ago, waiting for Lu Jiong and the others to come. It was less than 1:45. The front building was full of customers, but the back building was still quiet. Gui Qi jogged to Shui Rui's room through the drooping flower gate that led to the backyard. Shui Rui put away the account book and walked out of the door. Lu Jiong and the others entered the backyard talking and laughing. "Brother Rui." Feng Zhaomiao shouted first and jumped in front of Shui Rui in 2 steps. "I thought you were cooped up in the Supreme Court and wouldn't come out. Are you done with your work?" Shui Rui nodded, patted his shoulder and looked over there. He glanced over and noticed the 3 or 4 little girls in men's clothing following behind Lu Jiong, Rui and Rui Lin. Their hair and faces were powdered. When he looked again, he noticed the person Shiwen was holding intimately. His gaze paused and the smile at the corner of his mouth faded. "Brother Rui, today's meal is on you. Rui Lin got the official position in the Ministry of Justice yesterday. Now he is also a 5th-rank official like you." Lu Jiong smiled and pushed young Lord Rui, who was proud of his success, and said, "In the future, one of you will investigate cases in the Supreme Court, and the other in the Ministry of Justice. Zhaomiao no longer needs to worry about getting caught to see the officials if he gets into trouble, haha. I'm not that troublesome. Didn't the young lord hear that I'm also in the military? Now I'm also a person who does big things." Feng Zhaomiao retorted angrily and shyly, causing everyone to laugh. Shui Rui congratulated Rui Lin and led the crowd upstairs. A few ladies who were dressed as men lagged behind him. Shiwen was wearing a fiery red riding outfit. Her hair was tied up in a high braid, and she was holding onto a delicate girl dressed like a scholar. She whispered, "Little sister Zhu, I told you to come. Are you happy to see me?" Rui Zizhu heard her words and looked at the tall figure in front of her. Her face was red and she hung her head helplessly and said, "Princess, don't make fun of me. I'm here to accompany my brother." Hee hee. Shiwen curled the corner of her mouth, and her eyes flashed with ridicule, but her hand was affectionately holding Rui Zizhu upstairs. At the wine table, everyone was enjoying themselves. The table was full of delicacies, but they didn't eat much. Instead, 2 jars of wine went back and forth. Feng Zhaomiao had one foot on a stool and was gesticulating as he talked about the strange things he encountered in the military camp. When he talked about a centurion who woke up in the middle of the night to urinate, he met a ghost and was strangled. The girls at the table were frightened. Although they were scared, they still listened to him with trepidation. Shiwen drank the wine in the cup in front of her in one gulp, stood up and said, I'm going outside to get some fresh air. You guys continue to listen to his nonsense. Feng Xiaomiao smiled sinisterly and said to her, if you don't believe me, be careful. You'll bump into it later. Shi Wen spat at him and said, the sun is clear, how can there be ghosts? I'm not afraid. As soon as she finished speaking, she swiftly glanced at Shui Rui before turning around and leaving. Shui Rui was secretly pouring the wine in his hand into the spittoon under the table, so he didn't notice her look. After Shi Wen left the table, she didn't go far. She stood in the corridor for a while and saw a waiter passing by with a dish. She stopped him and handed him a rolled-up note with a golden bean on it. She whispered, give it to eldest young master secretly. Don't let others see it. The waiter was none other than Gui Ba. He looked at the thing in Shi Wen's hand and took it. He nodded and carried the dishes into the room in front of him. In the private room, Shui Rui had just stopped Lu Jiong from drinking a cup of wine. He put down the wine pot and saw the waiter bringing the dishes to his side. In a flash, a small paper ball appeared in his hand. He whispered in his ear, Master, it's the princess. Shui Rui held the paper in his hand as if nothing had happened. He opened it and looked at it. The next moment his face turned cold. 3 years ago in the Seaview Tower I saw it. Clenching his fist, Shui Rui straightened the corner of his mouth. There was a storm in his eyes. When he looked up again, there was a gentle smile on his face. He picked up the chopsticks and picked up a piece of lung slice. His hand trembled and it fell on his clothes, attracting the attention of several people. I'm going to wash up, you guys drink first. He put down the chopsticks, got up and walked out. No one at the table noticed his strange behavior just now. Only one person shyly peeked at his back. Shui Rui went outside and glanced at the empty corridor. He took a few steps forward and went up to the 3rd floor. When he turned the corner of the stairs, he saw Shi Wen, who was dressed in fiery red clothes, pacing back and forth outside the patio. When she saw him coming, she smiled sweetly at him. Shui Rui expressionlessly pushed open the door of a nearby room and walked in. Shi Wen followed him and didn't forget to close the door. When she turned around, she saw a pair of dark and threatening eyes. Her heart skipped a beat. She was clearly aware of the danger of the man in front of her at this time, but there was no turning back. She couldn't take half a step back. Brother Rui, you read the note, right? Let me tell you, 3 years ago in the palace, the 10th princess was killed by cousin Jinshuan. I saw what happened with my own eyes. Don't you want to know the truth? Shui Rui stared at her face and asked in a deep voice, what did you see? 3 years ago, the 10th princess, who was born by the empress, was greatly favored in the palace. The emperor favored the young and promising eldest young master of the Shang Shu Fu. Who would have thought that before the 10th princess could be betrothed, she slipped and fell from Guanhai Lu and fell into the lake. Afterwards, she died of a cold. At that time, a little eunuch in the palace identified that it was the young lady of the Shui family who entered the palace to accompany the 10th princess. Because she had a quarrel with the 10th princess, she accidentally pushed the 10th princess down the stairs. In a rage, the emperor asked the 7 members of the Shui family, including noble consort Shui, to kneel in front of Su Lu Palace for a whole night to admit their guilt for the death of the 10th princess. The emperor almost confiscated their whole family. Later, the emperor's anger subsided, so the Supreme Court intervened. However, the little eunuch committed suicide by jumping into a well. After all, there was no evidence and it became a headless case. Shui Lingnan was the backbone of the court and had served 3 generations of emperors. After the emperor's anger subsided, he only thought that the 10th princess slipped and fell from the building, so he didn't pursue the responsibility of the Shui family. The Shui family didn't decline from then on and kept the prosperity of the Shui family. However, first Madame Shui, who was originally blind, became seriously ill and almost died because of this. Shui Jinshuan's temperament changed greatly because of excessive shock. He was timid all day, hiding in his room and didn't dare to go out. He became half-mute. As soon as Shui Rui thought of what happened that year, a chill began to rise from the soles of his feet and slowly climbed up his spine to his neck. It was as if there was a pair of invisible hands strangling his neck, making it hard for him to breathe. When he opened and closed his eyes, he saw his gentle and kind mother madly slapping him and biting his arm. It was as if she couldn't wait to eat his bones and eat his flesh. You asked me what I saw? I can tell you. Not only can I tell you, but I can also help you testify to prove Jinshuan's cousin's innocence. But you have to promise me one thing. Shi Wen's eyes flickered. She was thinking about how to take this opportunity to negotiate with Shui Rui. She didn't notice that his whole body gradually became gloomy and his dark eyes were frighteningly deep. Since you saw it, why didn't you say anything that year? Shi Wen's face stiffened and she lowered her head. I was still young at that time. I saw the 10th princess fall from the building. I was scared. Later, when I mentioned it to my father, he asked me to keep my mouth shut and not to mention it to anyone. What do you want me to promise you? Shi Wen's 10 fingers intertwined in front of her chest. She bit her lips and resisted telling him her plan. Instead she said, I can't tell you now. When I think of something I'll tell you. Shui Rui was silent for a moment. Then he said in a low voice, then when you think of something you can tell me. Hearing his words, Shi Wen secretly let out a sigh of relief. Unknowingly, a layer of sweat appeared on her forehead. Only now did she feel that the stuffy atmosphere in the room was uncomfortable. Then I'll go down first. Shi Wen was afraid Shui Rui would go back on his word, so she opened the door and walked out with quick strides, and when she breathed in the fresh air outside, her mood abruptly eased up, causing her to stride briskly. When she arrived at the second floor, she just happened to encounter Yushu, who was walking up from the first floor. When the two met, they were both stunned. Shi Wen was the first to react. She sneered and snorted. Without even saying goodbye, she walked down the corridor with her hands clasped behind her back. Yushu had heard from Lin Fu that this group of people came to drink, so she didn't find it strange to see Shi Wen here. It was just that she looked up and felt suspicious. She didn't return to the room to wait for Shui Rui like she originally planned. Instead, she used the handrail to go up to the third floor. She easily found the second room that was half open. She pushed the door open and entered. When she saw Shui Rui sitting on the chair in the hall, she felt that there was something wrong with him. Thinking about Shi Wen, who she had just met downstairs, she frowned. She guessed that something had happened between the two of them and walked forward. Big brother, why are you sitting here? When Shui Rui heard Yushu's voice, he slowly raised his head and watched her approaching. When Yushu walked 2 steps in front of him, she could clearly see that his eyes were bloodshot. His lower jaw was stretched into a straight line, as if he was trying his best to endure something. His tall body was actually trembling slightly, and his lips were purplish without a trace of blood. She was startled. She couldn't care less and stepped forward to hold his face. What's wrong? Don't scare me, hey. As she spoke, she patted his shoulder to soothe his chest. After a moment of fluster, she was about to go out and call for help in a moment of desperation. Her hands had just left him, and before she could turn around, he suddenly hugged her. Shui Rui's arms were tightly wrapped around Yushu's waist and back. His arms were so tight that they almost broke her. He hugged her like that and felt the warmth from her body. He finally took a breath from his chest, like a survivor struggling to swim to the surface of the water. Shu, don't go. Chapter 491. In Yushu's comforting voice, Shui Rui finally calmed down. He relaxed the strength of his arms, but he still hugged her. He sat motionless on the chair with his eyes closed and calmed his mood. As for the table downstairs, Feng Xiaomiao didn't see Shui Rui coming back for a long time, so he asked Feng Xiaomiao to go out and look for him. Shi Wen met Yushu when she went downstairs. She thought that she and Shui Rui should be together at this time, so she was unhappy. She interrupted, I saw Brother Rui go up to the 3rd floor. You go and look for him. Feng Xiaomiao put down the wine glass and went out. Coincidentally, there was no one in the corridor at this time, so he went upstairs unimpeded. When he walked to the door of the second room, he looked inside and saw Shui Rui and Yushu hugging each other. He was stunned on the spot. He stood there dumbfounded. He didn't know whether to go forward or retreat. Yushu quickly noticed Feng Xiaomiao outside the door. She didn't rush to push Shui Rui away, but she asked him casually, Is the stall downstairs closed? Feng Xiaomiao said in a daze, No. They asked me to find Brother Rui to go back for a drink. Yushu looked down at Shui Rui and said to him, You go back and tell them that Brother Shui has something to do and left first. Tell them not to wait. Oh, Feng Xiaomiao turned around obediently. As soon as he lifted his foot, he felt something was wrong. He turned his head abruptly and almost sprained his neck. What happened to Brother Rui? Yushu patted Shui Rui's back and said, Nothing. He drank too much. Feng Xiaomiao's eyes looked around and couldn't help but fall on the two of them. An idea flashed in his mind and he recalled a scene. On the night when the restaurant just opened during the Lantern Festival in this dark corridor, Brother Rui took the lotus servant's hand and went downstairs. Feng Xiaomiao slapped his forehead and suddenly realized. He was wondering what was strange. It turned out that the two of them were together. Xiaomiao, after you go down, remember to help me call a fellow up here. Ah. Feng Xiaomiao scratched her head and stared at them a few more times before leaving in a daze. Yushu did not specifically remind him not to talk nonsense. She still trusted Feng Xiaomiao. On the surface he looked careless, but in fact he was very thorough. Moreover, he had always followed Shui Rui's lead. She believed that he would not cause any gossip for Shui Rui. Not long after, Gui Qi went upstairs. Yushu ordered him to brew a pot of thick tea with ice spring water. She also fetched a basin of clear water and personally wiped Shui Rui's hands and face. She also untied his tightly coiled hair and tied it up loosely. Shui Rui, on the other hand, did not say a word from beginning to end. He let her arrange everything until she was done and brought a cup of warm tea to his hand. "Big brother, drink some tea to calm yourself down." Shui Rui took a deep breath as if he had woken up from a dream. His body was still a little stiff, but he still obediently took the cup, held it in his hand and slowly took a sip. Yushu ordered Gui Qi to guard the stairs and closed the door. She returned to Shui Rui and sat down next to him. She held the back of his other hand and looked at his face that had regained color. She said, "Are you feeling better?" "Yes." Shui Rui held her hand and looked at her deeply. He said apologetically, "I scared you." Yushu slightly curled her lips. "Yes, you scared me. I thought you drank too much and had a stroke." Hearing her deliberate teasing, Shui Rui couldn't help but laugh. "How can a stroke be like this?" Yushu glanced at him. "Then tell me what happened to you." "You don't want to say?" Yushu leaned closer to him and narrowed her eyes. "I met Commandery Princess. She went upstairs. Did you do something shameful with her behind my back?" Shui Rui held her hand tightly. He couldn't bear to scold her lightly. "Nonsense again. I only spoke a few words with her." "Speaking a few words made you so angry?" "Then I must ask the Commandery Princess for advice. Where did she learn this ability to anger people to death?" Yushu didn't want to interrogate him, but she was really frightened by Shui Rui's appearance earlier. She clearly knew that it was she one who caused it, so how could she not be annoyed? If Shui Rui was really angered to the point that something bad happened to him, then she wouldn't spare that stinking little girl. Shui Rui gazed at her beautiful face that seemed arrogant because of her anger, and she was like a type of bird that he'd seen in the northern kingdom that was covered in ice and snow when he was traveling in his youth. It possessed soft and thick feathers and looked to be small and harmless, yet if anyone dared step on its territory, it would reveal its sharpest claws and attack its enemy head-on without the slightest hesitation, and it was ferocious and charming. His heart moved. He had an impulse to pour out the pain that had accumulated in his heart for 3 years to her. "Shu, didn't you want to hear about my past? Can I tell you about it?" Of course. Yushu nodded. She knew that what Shui Rui wanted to talk about must have something to do with his previous gaffe. Shui Rui held the teacup in one hand and held her hand in the other as he leaned against the back of the chair. He hesitated for a moment in his heart, but in the end he couldn't restrain himself anymore, so he said slowly, "When I was 14, I passed the first subject examination and passed the imperial examination. 3 years later, I received the imperial examination of grace and entered 2 rankings with great splendor. You won't be able to find a master genshur at my age in Anling City. Those who are ranked higher than me are either over 60 years old or have children. At that time I was young and glorious. I was proud and arrogant. I didn't put anyone in my eyes. Even the princes had to call me brother and show me some respect." Yushu seriously listened to Shui Rui recount this part of the past, and she could imagine how proud the young Shui Rui was. His background, talent, and appearance were all top-notch candidates, and it was sufficient for him to look down upon all his peers in the entire capital. "I've told you before, my mother lost her sight when I was young, and she couldn't manage the house. Moreover, my grandmother passed away early as well, so I didn't manage a proper marriage until I was 17 years old." Shui Rui said in self-ridicule. "It's probably because I looked down upon the young miss, and I felt that I was worthy of being the most outstanding woman in the world." When he was flashy and young, he went in and out of Qinxiang House and stayed in fragrant grass garden. Even the most talented courtesan couldn't shake the obsession in his heart. That year, the Hibiscus Gentleman Banquet was hosted by the Empress herself. It was in Dinghua House. The 10th princess, who had been pampered in the palace, appeared for the first time and shocked me. She was skilled in the 4 arts, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She could play a tune with just 1 sound and she could settle a game with just 1 piece. She was extraordinarily intelligent and beautiful. Compared to her, the ones I had seen before were all mediocre. When Yushu heard the sudden appearance of the 10th princess, she stilled unprepared. Then she looked at Shui Rui's face. The jealousy in her heart hadn't come out before it was replaced by confusion, because Shui Rui's face was not filled with infatuation and reminiscence, but an indescribably complex expression. To be able to shock you, the 10th princess must have been a peerless beauty. Yushu's face was a little puzzled. She couldn't help but ask, how old was the 10th princess at that time? The 10th princess was ranked behind Lu Tan. Lu Tan was only 16 or 17 years old. Then 3 years ago the 10th princess was only 13 years old. She was so young, what was there to see? Shui Rui could roughly guess what she was thinking and told her. When the 10th princess was born, Jinshang was the crown prince. At that time, the great advisor personally divined and said that she was a beauty that the heavens were jealous of and had to hide her surname for 3 years. So she was only recorded in the Jade Archive when she was 3 years old. Even though she was ranked after Jing Wang, she was older than Jing Wang. That year she was 16 or 8 years old. Yushu could see that Shui Rui didn't have any nostalgia for the dead princess and couldn't be bothered to be jealous. She shook his hand and asked, and then? After the hibiscus gentleman's banquet, I tried my best to find out a lot about the 10th princess. The more I heard, the more love I felt for her. So I told my feelings to my grandfather, hoping that he would help me ask for a favor in front of the emperor. At this point he paid attention to Yushu. Seeing that there was no displeasure on her face, he continued, but grandfather reprimanded me and didn't agree. He was the eldest son and grandson of the Shui family. In the future he would inherit the family business and protect the family name. If he were to become the prince's son-in-law, it would be equivalent to changing half of the imperial surname. In the future he wouldn't even be able to become an official and would have to bend his knees to a woman. How could Shui Lingnan bear to part with his grandson, whom he had high hopes for? Not only did he not agree, he even used the family discipline to teach Shui Rui a lesson, trying to dispel his thoughts. At that time I was young and full of vigor. I didn't have the heart to become an official. After studying for more than 10 years, I had long grown tired of it. So my grandfather's lesson not only didn't warn me, but it made me even more determined not to become a mediocre official. It's funny that I never thought that if it wasn't for my grandfather's position as an official, who would pay attention to me? If I was poor and had nothing, then what would I be? Shui Rui laughed at himself and unceremoniously mocked himself. Yushu didn't feel good when she heard this. She could see that he was regretting his rebellious behavior in the past. However, he grew up like that, without his mother by his side. He only had a strict elder to supervise him every day. How could he not feel depressed? With great difficulty he finally had an opportunity to break free from his shackles. Of course he wouldn't give it up. In the middle of the 10th month of that year, His Majesty went into disguise in the south of the city and asked me to accompany him. I seized this opportunity to go into disguise in order to inspect the situation of the people. Shui Rui purposely led the way to cause trouble, but he was also lucky. He happened to encounter a family crying on the street and blocking the road. It was an unsolved murder case. He solved the case on the spot and persuaded the 8th prince, who took advantage of every opportunity to expose his identity. His Majesty then sent people to capture the tyrant and murderer, causing the whole street to kneel and worship him. After the emperor returned to the palace, he was very happy and made a promise. I took the opportunity to show my admiration for the 10th princess. As I wished, the emperor promised me that after the new year, he would appoint a marriage for the 10th princess. At that time there were many people present, so this matter was leaked. My grandfather was the first to hear the news, but he couldn't do anything about it. Yushu saw the guilt on his face. He seemed to be immersed in some kind of memory. After a long time of silence, she couldn't help but say, "I'll tell you the truth. Before I went to Huajin Garden, I heard the story of you and the 10th princess. But in the end, I still couldn't understand how such a noble and wealthy person disappeared." Chapter 492. The little eunuch who came to summon said that the 10th princess was pushed down from the West Palace by Jinshuan and drowned. Yushu looked at Shui Rui's cold face and recalled Xen Lu's evasive attitude when he mentioned Shui Jinshuan to her that day. Her intuition told her that the 10th princess's death was not simple. She was definitely not killed by Shui Sanmei as rumored. When the family heard the news, they were in a mess. I was even more at a loss. On one hand, I didn't believe that my sister would harm the princess. On the other hand, I was worried about the 10th princess. My grandfather took me to the palace to ask for forgiveness. At dusk, we arrived at the Chengyuan gate leading to the West Palace and saw Jinshuan tied up and kneeling in front of the gate. Shui Rui's face was as dark as water. He couldn't forget his sister, who was not even as tall as his chest, shivering and crying in the snow. It was also at that time that he suddenly realized that no matter how bright his future was, when he was at the foot of the emperor, life and death were just a matter of a thought. After the 10th princess fell into the water, she fell into a coma. She had a fever at night and passed away in the middle of the night. Shui Rui took a breath and continued. The emperor was furious and didn't investigate carefully. He only listened to the testimony of a little eunuch and thought that it was Jin Xuan who killed the princess. So he issued an edict, angrily reprimanding my grandfather for not being strict in the family and for not teaching his daughter properly. He ordered the imperial concubine and the women of the Shui family to go to the 10th Princess Su Lu palace to apologize. At that time he and his grandfather waited outside the palace in fear. When he first heard the bad news he was completely stunned. When he was in a daze, he saw a heavy slap on his face and saw his grandfather's gloomy face. Since he was 5 years old, Shui Rui had always been by Shui Lingnan's side. Even though the old man was strict and serious in speech and manner, he still cared about everything in Shui Lingnan's life. Shui Rui had never thought that he would see resentment on the face of such a senior that he respected and loved. It was as if Shui Rui was not his grandson but his enemy. When Shui Rui recalled that scene, his eyes couldn't help but turn gloomy, hiding his emotions that no one knew. In these 3 years, he often thought that if he had not insisted on becoming the emperor's son-in-law, then the 10th princess would probably be living well, his younger sister would still be a clever and lively girl, his mother might not have gone mad, and he would never know the secret that had consigned him to eternal damnation. Yu Shu was shocked when she heard this. This time, the emperor not only slapped the Shui family's face, but also old Minister Shui, who was in a high position, had never been scolded like this before. As an official, he was most afraid of the word disobedience. Thinking about it, it was like a knife was placed on his neck and could be chopped off at any time. The emperor's actions were too hasty. She couldn't help but feel injustice for Shui Rui and his sister. She wasn't afraid to complain about the emperor and voiced her suspicions. How old was Jin Sun at that time? Was he even 12? Was the princess someone that a gust of wind could blow over? Would she be pushed down from a building by a half-grown child like Jin Sun? I don't believe it. The little eunuch who testified must have something wrong. Who else was there at that time? Was he the only witness? Didn't several Junju and young misses go to the palace to celebrate Guifei Yangyang's birthday? Why did the two of them go to that sea viewing tower? Didn't you ask Jin Sun? Shui Rui had a trace of disdain on the corner of his mouth. Jin Sun was very frightened and couldn't say anything. When the 10th princess had an accident, she was tied up. The little eunuch testified that he was cleaning the sea viewing tower and saw Jin Sun and the 10th princess quarreling on the balcony that had just been repaired. Jin Sun pushed her and she fell from the building. 3 days after the princess passed away, Xiang Wang and several officials who were on good terms with grandfather entered the palace one after another to persuade him. After His Majesty's anger subsided, he ordered an investigation of the matter. That little eunuch drowned in the imperial garden for no reason. And because Jin Sun was agitated, whenever she mentioned what happened at Sea Viewing Tower that day, she would only cry and talk nonsense. Even now she can't remember what happened at that time. Because there was no evidence, that little eunuch also died. Xiang Wang tried his best to persuade him. His Majesty also felt that there was something fishy about the matter. It probably involved the dark secrets of the palace and didn't want to investigate further. So he withdrew the blame on Jin Sun and ordered the palace to seal it. After appeasing grandfather, it was considered to have been left unsettled. Yu Shu's brows were knotted. Now she was even more certain that the 10th princess' death was unusual. Thinking about it carefully, there were only a few people in the palace who had the ability to harm a princess under the emperor's nose and did it so covertly. Once the 10th princess died, firstly, you can't be the son-in-law. Secondly, the emperor will vent his anger on you. Thirdly, the empress will lose her beloved daughter and will probably be at odds with Guifei Yangyang. Who will benefit from this? Shui Rui turned his head and saw that she was seriously thinking about his words. She was calm and sharp, not like the hypocritical and pointless comforting people around him in the past. She also didn't look down on him because of the mistakes he made when he was young and frivolous. His dark eyes couldn't help but have a glimmer of hope. If one day she found out about his secret, would someone as sentimental as her laugh it off and not care about it at all? Thinking of this, the heaviness in his heart lessened. He turned her soft palm over. Their palms were pressed against each other. The warm sweat made him feel at ease. He told her in a low voice, the concubines in the inner palace have never stopped fighting. The current empress doesn't have an heir, which is a drawback. However, Count Zhongyong's family has been loyal for generations and is a great power in court. If I was still the 10th princess, the empress and aunt would have an extra layer of intimacy. When the day comes to choose the heir apparent, it is hard to guarantee that I won't be obstructed by some people. Yu Shu raised her head to look at him. It was the first time she heard the words, choose the heir apparent, from his mouth. Because she had already mentally prepared herself when she met the tiger in Huajin Garden, her heart didn't waver. Since she had the intention to be a couple with Shui Rui, then no matter how difficult the path ahead was, she had to work hard and give it a try. It's funny that I couldn't see clearly in the past and only thought about myself. Shui Rui didn't know how many times he had mocked himself. In terms of shrewdness, how could he compare to his grandfather Shui Lingnan in the past? The old man was able to keep his composure. There was a grandson of an imperial prince who was sent to the mountains to learn, but he was told to get close to the 7th prince under Shu Fei's name. In the beginning he had opposed him to marry a mistress because he was cautious. Who would have thought that because of his own initiative, it was almost destroyed in a day? 3 years ago the emperor had the intention of summoning the 9th prince from Longhu Mountain. It was because of this matter that it was delayed. As a result, the 9th prince delayed his return to Jing for a few years. He grew up smoothly until he was 17. However, he stumbled and implicated many people around him. This lesson was harsh enough that when he did things now, no matter how big or small, he would be careful. The empress and Gui Fei are harmonious. The biggest threat is Shu Fei and Ning Wang. Yu Shu remembered hearing someone say that 3 years ago Shui Rui and Lu Hao were so close they could wear the same pants. But because of a certain reason the two had a falling out. Was it because of the matter of the 10th princess Lu Hao was involved? There is no proof. Shui Rui did not hide anything from Yu Shu and said truthfully, but I do suspect that Shu Fei did something and because of this I alienated Ning Wang. Yu Shu said, last year at Dingbo Hall Xiang Wang Shitzi was gambling. Ning Wang came uninvited. I remember that he was entangled with you, but what happened 3 years ago? When the 10th princess passed away, the Holy One punished me. I was afraid that Jin Sun would suffer and sent a letter to the Princess Fu outside the palace to ask for Ning Wang's help, hoping that he could say a few good words when he entered the palace. But he did not appear from beginning to end, that is all. Shui Rui calmly narrated the reason why he and Lu Hao had parted ways. He did not seem to be dissatisfied because of Lu Hao's inaction, but only he knew, what happened 3 years ago had caused him to be filled with regret and self-blame. But the more he blamed himself, the more he resented the culprit behind the scenes who caused the 10th princess' death and shifted the blame to his younger sister. It was originally my fault, but the innocent had to bear it. I have wronged them all my life, especially the 10th princess. If I did not have wishful thinking, she would not have lost her life in vain. Shui Rui was sad. He still could not let go of the 10th princess' death. Even though he did not love her, he was filled with regret. I once swore, he narrowed his eyes, his gaze deep, that in my lifetime I will find the culprit who caused her death. At this time, Yu Shu's mood was somewhat subtle. At the beginning she thought that Shui Rui did not have much longing for the 10th princess. In addition, the 10th princess was already dead, so there was nothing to be jealous of. But now it seemed that Shui Rui had clearly engraved that fairy-like princess in his heart, and it became a knot in his heart. Yu Shu knew that it was not interesting to bother about a dead person, not to mention that the 10th princess was indeed innocent and pitiful. She not only sympathized but also admired a responsible man like Shui Rui. But when she thought of how fragile and out of control Shui Rui had been previously, it could have been for another woman, she could not remain calm. You still haven't told me what Princess Shiwen said to you before I came here that would make you so angry. Shui Rui's breathing became heavy, and a small storm gathered in his eyes that had calmed down not long ago. She said that she personally witnessed the truth of the 10th princess falling from the building 3 years ago, and that it was not Jin Sun's doing. Yu Shu's almond-shaped eyes widened. She was surprised at first, but after a moment she sneered. Since she knew the truth, why didn't she stand out to testify back then? Why did she mention it today? I'm afraid that she has other intentions. If I'm not wrong, she must have used this as a reason to raise some conditions to you. Shui Rui also knew that she was so shrewd that he could not hide it from her. She wanted me to do something but said that it was not the right time yet, so she could not tell me for the time being. Yu Shu gritted her teeth, feeling extremely unhappy in her heart. She could not think of what Shiwen wanted, but as a person who had been through it, she certainly could see what that girl was thinking about Shui Rui. Of course, A man who dared to think about her really needed to be taught a lesson. You promised her? Yushu held her breath, narrowed her eyes slightly and looked at Shui Rui. Shui Rui noticed her unhappiness and hesitantly nodded. When he was about to explain again, his palms, which were clasped together, were firmly squeezed by her. The force was so fierce that even he felt a little pain. Why don't you ask me instead of her? Yushu gritted her teeth and said. She wanted to bite the man in front of her who was too serious and responsible. Shui Rui was stunned for a moment. Looking at her heroic and arrogant eyes, an idea flashed in his mind and his eyes brightened. You mean, with your divination skill? But didn't you say that it would take 1.5 years to master it? Can it work now? Yushu was angry in her heart. Her wrist twitched and she pushed his hand away. She stood up and looked at his handsome facial features condescendingly, especially that pair of warm and attractive peach blossom eyes, and said domineeringly, "It has to work even if it can't." Chapter 493. One chapter. Yushu was full of confidence in Shui Rui's words to deduce the cause of the 10th princess's death using the law of calamity. However, it was a little difficult to actually do it. First of all, he needed to know the 10th princess's birthday. Just this requirement alone was enough to give Shui Rui a headache. It was not difficult to know the birthday of an imperial princess, but it would take a lot of effort to find out the exact time. Especially after the 10th princess was born, she hid her surname for 3 years. Her birthday was only recorded in the Imperial Jade Archive. Not many people knew about it. Although His Majesty had appointed a marriage, he had not issued an imperial edict. Hence he did not take our birthday to marry. Otherwise we could have used it, said Shui Rui. Hearing his tone of pity, Yushu blinked and echoed, "Yes, it's a pity that you didn't even get to be the emperor's son-in-law. At best you're just a reserve." Only then did Shui Rui realize that he had misspoken. He vaguely smelled a hint of jealousy in Yushu's words. His heart skipped a beat, but he did not avoid her gaze. He smiled and said, "I'm not even a reserve now." He was implying that Yushu had not even thought about marrying him. He, as her lover, was still far from being a reserve. His gaze was burning. Yushu looked away guiltily and changed the topic. "Besides knowing the princess's birthday, you also need to know the day of her death. How long will it take for you to find out?" "Give me 3 days." Yushu nodded. Shui Rui had always been efficient in his work. She was not worried that he would be helpless. 3 days was not a long time. She could use this time to prepare in advance and organize all the cases that could be used to calculate the value so that she could deduce when the time came. "Don't worry, big brother." She changed her mind and reassured Shui Rui, "Although my time of calamity law is not complete, the cases that I have at hand to speculate on are ready-made. The death of the 10th princess cannot escape from man-made disaster. I will start from this point and will definitely help you solve your doubts." Shui Rui didn't know much about Yushu's divination, but he believed that Yushu wouldn't make empty promises. If she said she was confident, then she was confident. The mystery that had been bothering him for 3 years was about to surface, and he could finally have someone to talk to. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his body, and he felt indescribably light. The way he looked at Yushu also became more and more persistent. 3 years ago, he was arrogant and thought that only a stunning beauty like the 10th princess could match him. 3 years later, he had washed away his arrogance, but he had already seen through it. Talent and beauty were all foolishness, but it was difficult to pursue one's heart. In the past, when he saw Yushu advancing forward indomitably for the sake of Jingqin, he was also envious and jealous and coveted her. He admitted that he took advantage of the situation and put in a lot of effort, but he fell deeper and deeper. Now that he had finally snatched her away, he must hold on to her this time no matter what. "By the way, how are you going to deal with Princess Shiwen?" Yushu raised her eyebrows and asked him. A cold light flashed in Shui Rui's eyes. "I'm not in a hurry to refuse her. I want to see what she is planning." The death of the 10th princess was a disease in his heart. No matter what Shiwen knew, she dared to use this to threaten him, so she had to bear the consequences. At this moment, Shiwen, who was full of calculations, would never have thought that after she proposed the conditions to Shui Rui, in Shui Rui's heart, she was no longer the innocent and harmless little cousin of the past. Yushu narrowed her eyes, looked at Shui Rui and slowly grinned. She reached out and patted his shoulder heavily. "Since you want to deal with her, then I will be magnanimous and spare her. She has evil intentions towards you." Shui Rui couldn't help but laugh. He pressed her hand down, stood up from the chair, and firmly held her hand as they walked out. Yu Shu curled up the corner of her mouth and let him hold her hand, not afraid of those people who were secretly watching her. This was the Wangji Tower. Don't think that she wouldn't find out if Shui Rui didn't mention it. This place was very expensive. Even Ah Ping and Ah Xiang, who were sweeping the floor, were trained. How could they let those shady spies sneak in? It was precisely because of this that she dared to come and meet privately with Shui Rui. Ever since she returned from Huajin Garden, she ought to have been targeted by someone. Presumably, those people had long since known that her relationship with Shui Rui was extraordinary. If she suddenly became estranged from Shui Rui at this time and refused to leave the house, it would instead arouse suspicion. Fortunately, Shui Rui had always been very considerate towards her, and he had never acted out of line when they were outside. Moreover, they addressed each other as brother and sister, so it was difficult to see the big picture. The two of them had been intimate for so many days, and it was only today that Feng Xiaomiao came across them. Yu Shu found joy in bitterness and muttered in her heart, "How did it become like an affair?" It was already afternoon when she left the room. The sun shone into the corridor from the west, and the hot sunshine was burning on her body. Yu Shu was dazzled. She turned her head and looked at Shui Rui. His handsome face seemed to be plated with a layer of golden light. He was so sincere. She was slightly absent-minded, and suddenly a thought came to her mind. He was willing to confess his sad past to her, so he should be willing to believe her. Then could she also believe him? Why not wait until she figured out the cause of the 10th princess's death, and then tell him about the life breaker? With such a thought, Yu Shu suddenly felt that her breathing was much smoother. She didn't even hesitate much. She walked down from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor, and she had already made up her mind. When she figured out the cause of the 10th princess's death, she would tell him. After Shui Rui confessed to Yu Shu, he didn't pretend. He quickly left Wangji Tower and went to inquire about the 10th princess's life and death. And Yu Shu didn't idle. She picked up a few beautiful crystal pendants from the Feng Shui pool and 2 bracelets, one white and one yellow. Then she went to the Taiheng Chamber of Commerce to find Pei Jing. Today she bumped into him again. In the second half of every month, Pei Jing, the manager of the Chamber of Commerce, spent more time in the building than outside. After coming to the capital, he worked much harder than he did in Yang City. "It's such a hot day, why did you come here?" Pei Jing came out of the accounting room in the backyard, sweating profusely. His collar was wet with sweat. Yu Shu quickly poured the herbal tea on the table for him to drink and said with a smile, "I came out to buy something, so I came to see you on the way. I'll leave after a few words. You still have to go." Pei Jing wiped his sweat and drank the tea. He saw her take off a new green silk pouch and handed it to him, saying, "This is the crystal I raised. I've asked someone to carve it. Uncle, give it to aunt and little sister to play with." At first, Pei Jing didn't care. He put down the teacup, pinched the pouch and poured the contents into his palm. Then his eyes were blinded. This is the water essence you bought from the sea merchant I introduced?" Pei Jing held the colorful crystal in his palm. He couldn't believe it. Yu Shu explained with a smile, "This is what I raised in the Feng Qi pond. It's not a water essence anymore, it should be called a crystal. Look, aren't they ice crystals and clear water? Don't just look beautiful. If you wear it, it can also attract good luck and avoid bad luck. I've tried the white and yellow ones. The white crystal can calm the nerves and nourish the brain. The yellow crystal is good for wealth. I haven't seen any difference in the pink one, but it's good to wear it. If you don't believe me, you can try wearing it." Yu Shu wasn't stingy with her family. Considering that Pei Jing's family didn't have many people, she took a yellow crystal bracelet for Madame Qin, a pair of pink crystal gourd pendants, which could be inlaid into earrings, and a big white crystal pair with a few jade beads to make a waist pendant, which was also very beautiful. She spoke clearly and logically. Pei Jing's fingers rubbed the items in his hand. He was secretly shocked. As a shrewd and far-sighted merchant, he thought more than Yu Shu. "The water essence you bought from me last time can be raised to this level?" "Yes, but it will take some time and effort." Yu Shu took a sip of herbal tea and looked at the quiet outside the door. She lowered her voice and told him her idea. "To tell you the truth, I didn't expect to raise it to this level. I was hoping to make a fortune with this thing." Pei Jing didn't hide anything from her. "As long as it is done properly, it is indeed a windfall. Isn't it? I tell you, this thing has been raised for half a month. Other than the one you have, I have only given out 2 pieces. There are already people asking about it, but I haven't touched it. I'm waiting for a while. It will be a rare commodity." Pei Jing raised his head and looked at her. He asked uncertainly, You said that it can attract good luck and avoid bad luck. Can it be guaranteed to work? Of course. I've tried it. Some people don't even dream at night after wearing the white crystal. But after a few days they feel much better. I wear this yellow crystal myself. The first day I took it out to roll the dice. Guess what? I rolled 10 leopards in a row. It scared me. Yushu answered readily at first. Then she added a little embarrassedly, however, the effect of this crystal comes and goes quickly. It's not as effective as the day before. At most, after a few months, it won't be as effective as it was at the beginning. It needs to be put back into the furnace for a while to recuperate. How could she not know the pros and cons of the things she made herself? Even if it was a little unsatisfactory, it still made Pei Jing's eyelids twitch. He asked again, will this look change? How can that be? Yushu smiled. Seeing that he was still worried, she rolled up her wrist and showed him the string of yellow crystals. Look, I've been wearing this for half a month. Isn't it the same? After a long time, at most, it will be stained with some skin cream. It will be clean after washing. Pei Jing asked her a few more questions. After he figured it out, he couldn't sit still anymore. He stood up holding the cold and slippery crystals and walked back and forth in front of Yushu, making her dizzy. Uncle, what's wrong? Pei Jing didn't pay attention to her. After hesitating for half a cup of tea, he suddenly stopped and stared at Yushu. He said with a faint excitement, Xiaoyu, do you trust Uncle? Under his stare, Yushu quivered. She sat up straight and said, I do, of course I trust. What kind of character Pei Jing had, it didn't need to be said. It was said that merchants valued profits, but he was the rare one among 100 unscrupulous merchants. Good. With your words, you only need to carefully take care of the crystals in your hands. You don't need to worry about anything else. Leave it all to Uncle to take care of. Let's not talk about the future. Once the crystals in your hands are sold, I guarantee that you will gain both fame and fortune. You will earn a lot of money. Pei Jing hadn't been this excited in many years. In Yiyang City he was the respected chief steward Pei. But when he came to the precious land of Jing, he couldn't even be ranked. If he hadn't been in dire straits when he was young, he wouldn't have been able to endure such a difference. But now there was an opportunity in front of him. Feng Shui objects. This had always been a good business for the De Exchange Hall. It wasn't that ordinary merchants didn't covet them, but they couldn't get involved. At most, they would make a small fuss and lose more than they would earn. Xiaoyu, Uncle will say something to you. This time, I won't be greedy for a single cent of your money. I just want to borrow your east wind. Chapter 494. Updated, Yushu walked out of the Tihan Business Association and stood in the sunset. Her head was still a little hazy. Pei Jing had spent an hour to instill his ideas into her. Unfortunately, she was not good at business. From beginning to end, she only understood one thing. Uncle Pei wanted to bundle her with the crystal and sell it together. To put it bluntly, he wanted to use her name and use her reputation to increase the value of the crystals through the channels of the Tihan Business Association. Then he would use the value of the crystals to help her earn money and reputation. Alright, Yushu understood, but if she really wanted to operate it, she definitely had to rely on Pei Jing, the expert. Thus, the uncle and nephew decided to work together to do this business. Pei Jing insisted on not taking a single cent of the profits. Yushu had no choice but to give him full authority. Even old Su's place was allowed to be visited by him. She only needed to provide the crystals for the feng shui cultivation. Back home, Yushu first went to Zhao Hui's room to show off the few bracelets that she had grown the first time. Because she had other uses, she did not keep them for her family. This second batch, she had to give them to her own people first. A string of white crystal beads, a string of pink crystal beads, a pair of topaz pendants, and a pair of peach pendants made of white crystal. It was truly a jewel. When Yushu took them out from her purse, Zhao Hui was mesmerized. When she was a daughter, her family was rich, but she had never seen such rare gems. This is a feng shui object that I raised. It didn't cost much money. Mother, don't worry and keep it, Yushu said with a smile. See if you want to make it into a pendant or inlay it into jewelry. You don't have to keep it for me. I have a few more. Although there was still old Madame He at home, Yushu was the closest to Zhao Hui. If she wanted to show off to the old lady, Zhao Hui would have to send it to her mother-in-law to please her mother-in-law. Zhao Hui was also a woman. How could she not like jewelry? Although she was curious about where Yushu got it, she did not like to inquire about it. She would not suspect that Yushu had done something bad. Hearing Yushu's words, she happily accepted it. Zhao Hui asked the little maidservant Lu Fu to go to the dressing table in the bedroom to find a more exquisite box. She fondled the string of pink crystals and tried it on her wrist. Although it was a little tight, it served as a foil to the round and smooth skin of her hand. Even at her age, it didn't look the least bit pretentious when she wore it. Does it look good? How many years had it been since Zhao Hui's body had such a tender color? Her most fragrant years were all ruined by that cruel and unscrupulous marriage. Although she had found a husband now, it was a pity that her youth had passed. Yushu moved over to hold her hand and praised generously, "It looks good. Mother's skin is white and light colors are the most suitable. When we go back, we'll take apart the white beads and make a few beads to wear. It'll look simple and elegant. When Godfather sees it, he'll probably go home early every day and guard you. He won't even want to go to the clinic anymore." Zhao Hui was happy. Being teased by a little girl, her old face blushed. She nagged, "A girl doesn't have a proper appearance. If your father hears it, he'll definitely scold you again." With He Xiaochuan, this precious son, He Fangji became a father and became more and more presentable. He was no longer polite to Yu Shu and Yu Xiaoxiu in the past. Now, whenever he saw the siblings in the wrong, he would scold them with a fierce face, looking very much like a strict father. If Yu Shu was supporting him and never talked back to him, then Yu Xiaoxiu liked to be scolded. Yu Shu saw several times that He Fangji talked to Yu Xiaoxiu with a straight face. That child raised his face and looked like he was enjoying it. He didn't feel like he was being scolded at all. Instead, he became more and more admiring. This made Yu Shu couldn't help but think of Yu Xiaoxiu's background. She secretly thought about having her younger brother recognize Zhao Hui and her husband as his parents. Originally, when Yu Shu recognized his family, she considered that Yu Xiaoxiu was the only descendant of the Yu family and that Aunt Cui was still alive. She asked Yu Xiaoxiu for his opinion, so she didn't let him call them father and mother like her. However, her thoughts were different now. Yu Xiaoxiu would definitely learn her skills in the future. When she perfected the time of calamity, she would slowly teach him. Han Wenguang was able to teach the three predictors, so how could her, Yu Shu's younger brother, learn badly? Thinking about the long term, Yu Xiaoxiu only had a dishonorable birth mother, Aunt Cui, which was obviously not enough. Just based on his background, he was far inferior to others. Yu Shu thought about it again and didn't reveal it to Zhao Hui. She planned to ask Yu Xiaoxiu first to see what he thought. Therefore, in the evening, Yu Xiaoxiu came back from the medical center with He Fangji. Yu Shu didn't mention it at the dinner table. She waited until he finished his homework before she found him in the room. "Xiaoxiu, come sit here." Yu Shu lit the lamp at the bedside and patted the seat next to her. She let Yu Xiaoxiu sit by her bed. The brother and sister were only 4 years apart in age. They had lived together since they were young and slept in the same bed. Usually they didn't care about trifles and didn't have the broken rules of a rich family. Yu Xiaoxiu sat beside Yu Shu obediently. These days he had grown a lot taller. He was not as thin as he was at the beginning of the year. His facial features were regular and delicate. Like Yu Shu, he had a pair of almond-shaped eyes with light eyebrows, big eyes and a small mouth. At first glance, it was obvious that they were born from the same pair. "Sister, I have finished my homework on time. The headmaster praised my calligraphy today. I'm not lazy or naughty. The day before yesterday, I tore my pants while riding a horse. I also told Aunt Hui about it. She said that I grow fast. In a few days, she will hire a tailor to measure my length. Sister, do you think I can grow as tall as Brother Shui in the future?" Yu Shu would check Yu Xiaoxiu's homework every once in a while and talk to him. Yu Xiaoxiu was used to it, so he confessed frankly first. "Then you should eat more, sleep early and wake up early." Yu Shu rubbed his head. She sighed inwardly at the ease with which this child was worry-free. At the same time she probed, "Little Xiu, do you miss your father?" "Father?" Yu Xiaoxiu's eyes showed a little confusion. Then he looked at Yu Shu strangely. "Sister, you are confused. How old was I when our father was alive? How could I remember him?" Yu Shu coughed. She almost forgot that father you died early. She quickly covered it up and said, "I mean, do you want to have a father?" But Yu Xiaoxiu was shocked by her words. He straightened his body and widened his eyes. "Mother is going to remarry again?" "No, what are you thinking?" Yu Shu rolled her eyes at him. She felt that it was difficult to talk in a roundabout way with him, so she said straightforwardly, "Let me put it this way. Do you want to formally recognize a godfather and godmother and be their son?" When Yu Xiaoxiu heard that it was not Zhao Hui remarrying, he was relieved. When he heard what Yu Shu said next, his eyes obviously brightened. But he still asked doubtfully, "Will mother agree?" Yu Xiaoxiu was different from Yu Shu. He was the heir of the Yu family. His biological mother was still alive. If he wanted to recognize a godfather, his biological mother had to agree. Otherwise it would be unfilial. As long as you are happy and willing, mother will definitely agree. Yu Shu saw that he was tempted, so she guaranteed. As for whether Aunt Cui was willing or not, it was not a problem. Yu Xiaoxiu lowered his head and thought for a long time. In the end, he couldn't resist the temptation of having a father and mother. He nodded shyly. Aunt Hui is very good to me. Uncle, he also treats me like his own son and is willing to teach me everything. If I can call them father and mother, I will be happy. That's good. I will tell them tomorrow. Yu Shu wrapped her arms around Yu Xiaoxiu's neck and pinched his face. Yu Xiaoxiu frowned and pushed her away. The sister and brother played together. Chapter 495. The next day Yu Shu went to the Taisha library. When she saw Situ Qinglan, she took out her purse and gave her a white crystal gourd pendant the day before. Situ Qinglan was surprised. For me? Yes, I saw that you liked it last time, so I left one for you after I raised it. Situ Qinglan played with it for a while. After hesitating, she handed it back to her. I can't accept such an expensive thing. Yu Shu saw that Situ Qinglan didn't accept it even though she liked it. She thought that Situ Qinglan didn't know that Mr. Fang had asked her for it, so she pushed her hand back with a smile and said, I'm willing to give it to you not to please you. I just treat you as a friend. If you don't accept it, it means that you look down on me. Hearing this, Situ Qinglan knew that she couldn't refuse any more. She accepted it with a little embarrassment, but she felt very happy in her heart. One had to know that although Yu Shu was 2 years younger than her, she was very famous in Taisha Shuyuan. It was not that no one wanted to get close to her, but she did not like to talk to others. To be able to be on good terms with her and be seen as a friend by her, who could say that it was not something to be proud of? By the way, have you heard? Situ Qinglan pulled Yu Shu to sit down on the mat and whispered to her, Zhan Shuiyuan has passed the level 7 assessment. She can go to the Taisha library at the beginning of next month. Hearing this, Yu Shu's eyes flashed. She remembered Zhan Shuiyuan's identity as a target. Since she is working for the Celestial Commissioner, does she still have to study in the Taisha library in the future? Of course. She is a new student this year. She has to stay here for at least 3 years before she can leave, unless she wants to stay in the level 7 position for the rest of her life. Yu Shu nodded and said nothing. Situ Qinglan was puzzled. She thought that Yu Shu and Zhan Shuiyuan didn't like each other. Even if she wasn't angry after hearing this news, she wouldn't be so cold. What she didn't know was that Yu Shu felt sorry for Zhan Shuiyuan for being her substitute, so she didn't want to bother about what had happened before. After Fang Zijing's morning class, Yu Shu declined Situ Qinglan's proposal to go to Tibet with her. There was an astrology class a few days ago, and I had a few questions that I wanted to ask Academician Jing. Yu Shu wasn't joking. She was really going to Jing Chen's place. However, it wasn't to ask questions but to gather information. As one of the 18 academicians, Jing Chen had a dedicated lecture room. It was a tea house on a rockery at the corner of the garden. Yu Shu didn't know if Jing Chen had classes today, but she knew that he would most likely stay in the study if she had classes. As expected, when she was halfway up the stone stairs, she heard voices in the tea house. If it wasn't for Academician Jing's care these days, I wouldn't have been able to pass the assessment smoothly. You must accept this gift of thanks, otherwise I won't be able to trouble you in the future. Put it there. Academician Jing, I'm going to invite you to a banquet in a restaurant the night after tomorrow. I've also put the invitation here. You must come. It was a man and a woman talking in the tea house. Yu Shu knew who they were the moment she heard them. She walked over unhurriedly and looked inside. She saw Jing Chen sitting there and Zhan Shuiyuan standing there. There was a vertical brocade box on the table in the middle. There was a red piece of paper on the box, which was probably an invitation. It was a familiar scene, but Yu Shu didn't even frown. She didn't care what they were talking about. She stood outside the tea house and said, I'm Yu Shu. Nice to meet you. 2 pairs of eyes looked at her at the same time. Jing Chen was stunned at first, but then a faint smile appeared on his fair face. He looked a little nervous. When Zhan Shuiyuan saw Yu Shu, she was filled with hatred and fear. The blush on her face faded in the blink of an eye. She thought of the 2 slaps she had hidden. In the end, she didn't dare to confront Yu Shu face to face. She turned around and said goodbye to Jing Chen, then walked out. When she passed by Yu Shu, she bluffed and glared at her. Yu Shu did not pay attention to her. She waited until her footsteps were far away before she entered the tea house. Xiaoyu, I knew you'd come today. Jing Chenbu didn't move from his seat just now. He stood up from behind the desk, his feet wearing silk stockings and stepping on the ginger mat. He looked at Yu Shu, looking as if he wanted to go forward but was hesitant to do so. From your tone, can you predict whether I'll come or not? There were only 2 of them in the room. Yu Shu sneered. She carried her book box and found a clean cushion on the ground. I burned 3 turtle shells last night. The divination said that I could see you today. I was thinking that if you don't come today, I'll go to see you tomorrow. Jing Chen's tone was as clear as ever, without a single trace of impurity. His words were always so sincere, straightforward. It was very easy for people to let go of their worries. If Yu Shu hadn't given up on him at the observatory that night, she would have been soft-hearted. I'm here today because I have something to ask. Jing Chen, let's have a good talk about the Fate Breaker. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me at Ionor. Your support is my greatest motivation. P.S. Thank you for the gifts and tickets. Who wants Kim Bao to appear? Come and claim it. It's beside Yu Shu's pillow. Go get it yourself. During the month that Yu Shu stayed at the Building of Forgetfulness, she copied down all the key information about the deaths that the Supreme Court had accumulated over the decades. She sorted them according to the cause of death and bound them together into a book. She also gave this book an exaggerated and vivid name, Book of Life and Death. Because the law of time of disaster was still being completed, even if she got the time of life and death, it was impossible to apply the formula directly. If Yu Shu wanted to find the cause of death of the 10th princess, she would have to think hard. The cause of death of the 10th princess was strange and complicated. Although she fell from a building, drowned on a cold winter day and died of typhoid, the whole thing was not an accident. Therefore it should be attributed to a man-made disaster, not an illness. Yu Shu preliminarily judged that there was a real murderer in addition to the 10th princess and Xue Jinshuan in the sea viewing tower that day. He used some means to make the 10th princess fall from the building in front of Xue Jinshuan, but Xue Jinshuan didn't see it. After making assumptions, she listed all the similar cases in Book of Life and Death for backup. After doing this, Yu Shu didn't plan to sleep. She found the half box of ambergris from the small bookshelf near the bed and added it to the small copper stove. After burning the incense, Yu Shu sat down quietly, stretched the paper, hung up the brush and replaced it with her willow charcoal. She wrote a line of words on the top of the paper. It was Xue Rui's 4 birthdays. The last time she predicted the time of misfortune for Xue Rui was half a month ago. Using the law of the time of misfortune to predict what had happened in the past and what would happen in the future were very different. As long as she was given the time of her birth, no matter if it was a year or 2 or even 10 years ago, she could predict what would happen. However, there was a certain limit to the future disasters. For example, the closer the date, the more realistic it would be, and the further the date, the more illusory it would be. Therefore, she could only predict the future for half a month at a time to ensure accuracy. Today, Xue Rui was threatened by Princess Shiwen with the past, which confirmed her prediction that he was going to recruit villains. Moreover, it seemed that Shiwen had other tricks up her sleeves. Everything in this world was either a blessing or a curse, and no blessing or disaster was peace. Her law of the time of misfortune seemed to only be used for disasters, but in fact, it had already taken half of everything. She predicted a disaster, so no disaster was a blessing. Whether the conditions Shiwen proposed to Xue Rui were good or bad, she could tell with a single calculation. Let me see what you have in your mind. Yu Shu sneered, and the charcoal pen in her hand calculated quickly. Strings of numbers and symbols that only she could distinguish appeared on the paper, and the simple or complicated conversion was getting further and further away day by day. Originally it was aimed at Shiwen, but now that she calculated, Xue Rui had more than one trouble. Quarrel, losing money, hiss. Yu Shu felt strange. It should be known that Xue Rui's fate was extremely good. It was difficult for him to get a minor illness in half a year, and he did not even lose a penny for 2 months. Why did he suddenly have so many troubles recently? She remembered that last month she predicted a bloody disaster for him. Yu Shu pondered for a while, and still felt that the problem was with Xue Rui's current position. What kind of place was the Supreme Court? It was in charge of the harshest prison in the whole of Da'an. If he often went in and out of the prison, he could still rely on his own luck to suppress it, but after a long time, it was inevitable that he would be disturbed by evil spirits. Fortunately, I noticed it early and thought of a way to solve it once and for all. The fan made of century-old peachwood root and her crystal should be enough to restrain the evil spirits around him. On one hand, Yushu was making plans for Shui Rui, on the other hand, she did not stop writing. When she had calculated to a certain day, she suddenly stopped because she had discovered another disaster. Well, this is one. She quickly took out her handbook of calamities from the drawer, flipped through it twice and found a value on it. The number she had just calculated was within the range of values. Yushu looked at the date she circled on the paper with a strange expression and frowned. June 6th, peach disaster. June 6th, wasn't it the gentleman hibiscus banquet? Yushu's brain moved and intuitively linked Shui Rui's peach disaster with Princess Shiwen. There were good and bad things to do with peach blossoms, but the peach disaster specifically referred to those rotten peach blossoms. Because of a certain unsuitable relationship with the opposite sex, it caused disputes or disasters, which was a very bad thing. Princess Shiwen used the cause of the 10th princess's death as an exchange to ask Big Brother to agree to her condition, but said that it was not time yet. Could it be? Snap! Yushu used force in her hand and broke the 3-inch-long charcoal strip. Her face was full of anger. Shiwen, you actually have such a crooked idea. With a golden jade hibiscus at the gentleman hibiscus banquet, she could choose her own marriage, and it was a heaven-sent marriage. If Shiwen got the golden jade hibiscus, she would give it to Shui Rui, and then take advantage of the situation to propose a condition. Was she sure that Shui Rui would not refuse her because of the 10th princess? When she imagined that scene, Yushu was actually unable to be sure for a time. If it wasn't for Shui Rui being frank with her today and knowing that she was able to deduce the cause of death of the 10th princess, then would he be forced to submit on that day? The more Yushu thought about it, the more upset she became. She rubbed her sore eyebrows, annoyed, and simply threw away the broken willow charcoal strip, hastily cleaned up the paper and ink on the table, washed her hands and went to rest. It was late at night and the sky was about to brighten. Cicadas chirped outside the window, and a little yellow hair slipped along the bed curtain to the side of the pillow, its black eyes flashing. The figure on the bed turned over and murmured in a low voice. Chapter 496. I'm here today because I have something to ask. Jingqin, let's have a good talk about the fate breaker. Jingqin could predict that Yushu would come to him today, but he did not expect that Yushu would calmly propose to talk to him. That night at the observatory they had parted on bad terms. He knew that Xiaoyu would not treat him the way he used to. In order to salvage the situation, he had been thinking hard for the past few days. He had read the biography of Lu Yi many times before he finally found an answer. The dragon lady was deeply in love with Lu Yi because he had done many things for her. If Xiaoyu liked her too, he would have to learn from Lu Yi and help her solve her problems and protect her. Therefore he would not refuse her request. Whatever you want to ask, I'll tell you. Jing Chen's face was filled with a careful expression as he looked at Yushu, who was sitting in front of him. It wasn't that he had forgotten Zhu Muzhao's instructions, but he thought that since he had already confessed to Yushu, there was no point in hiding it anymore. Saying one or two things was the same, not to mention that he wouldn't lie. Yushu looked up at Jing Chen, who was standing there like a stick of bamboo. She did not like him and pointed at the mat. Sit down. Jing Chen readily accepted his advice and sat down obediently. He crossed his knees and placed his hands straight. When Yushu saw how obedient he was, she could not help but think of Jing Chen, who had lost his memory and could not speak. Her eyes darkened as she suddenly thought of Jing Chen, who had cut ties with her and treated her like a stranger. What you said to me in the small building that day after I went back, I carefully thought about it and found it strange. Since you said that I was the one who destroyed your life and needed my help, then you should let me know. Otherwise, it would be impossible for you to coax me into marrying you and having children with just a few words. Jing Chen did not hesitate and nodded. If being honest with Yushu could be exchanged for her understanding, then there was nothing he could not tell her. Yushu narrowed her eyes and went straight to the point. Tell me, where did you, the great calamity, come from? Why is it that your fate alone can decide the rise and fall of Dan? Was there a great calamity before? You are not the only one, right? Her series of questions caught Jing Chen somewhat unprepared. He was stunned for a moment before he slowly considered his words and told her everything he knew. That's right, I'm not the first calamity. Just 100 years ago, another person appeared. As for the origin of the term Great Calamity, I believe it came from an ancient scroll in the imperial family's collection. It recorded the signs of the appearance of a calamity, as well as the signs of the appearance of a fate breaker, as well as the method to break one's fate. There was one person who appeared 100 years ago? Yushu grasped the key point and asked, Was that great calamity also fated to offend planet Ketu like you? How did he break his fate? Was it the same as yours? Jing Chen had asked the same question before, so he didn't need to think too much when he answered, "That's right, the great peace calamity. Great fortune brings disaster. This great fortune refers to the rise and fall of a nation, and disaster refers to my fate offending the star of misfortune. As for the great calamity 100 years ago, although he was also affected by the star of Ketu, he was different from me. The person who broke his fate was a man, not a woman." Yushu's eyes flickered. Why is there a difference between a man and a woman? There is a difference. If the person who broke his fate is a woman, then she has to marry the great calamity and have children with him to break his fate. If the person who broke his fate is a man, then... Jing Chen paused as if he wanted to say something. Then what? Then the great calamity has to kill this person with her own hands. Jing Chen had been taught not to kill since he was young, so he felt somewhat uncomfortable when he mentioned such a disregarded matter. Yushu frowned. On one hand, she was secretly alarmed, rejoicing that the person who broke her fate was a woman. On the other hand, she noticed Jing Chen's expression and could not help but sneer. What? Do you still think that person is pitiful? Daozi is really kind-hearted. He can't bear to see others kill, but he doesn't know how many lives are tied to his own. Chao Yuling died unjustly, and Zhan Shuiyuan was used as a substitute. Who knows when he will follow in Chao Yuling's footsteps? Hearing this, Jing Chen met Yushu's mocking gaze. He lowered his head and said guiltily, "I won't kill Boren. Boren died because of me. Miss Chao's death was an accident, and I was powerless to reverse it. But as for Miss Zhan, I will do my best to look after her. I won't let her lose her life." Yushu saw his downcast expression and was not in the mood to hit him when he was down. She returned to the main topic and continued to ask, "These things you know, were they all told to you by the great Tiandao himself?" Jing Chen nodded. "He said it himself." Yushu asked again, "What about His Majesty? Did you ask His Majesty for confirmation?" Jing Chen raised his head to look at her. That suspicious expression on his face in Yushu's eyes could be summed up in 4 words. This person was so stupid that he was tricked. Yushu gave a humph and said in a bad mood, "What? Do you think that the great Tiandao won't lie to you? Even the sect elders who raised you for so many years for the sake of their own lives, made up a lie and hid it from you for more than 10 years, causing you to live in fear for more than 10 years. Why would the great Tiandao dig out their hearts and lungs for you? Do you think that everyone is like me who only hopes for the best for you?" Yushu swallowed the second half of her sentence and didn't say it out loud. It was all in the past, so there was no meaning in bringing it up again. She had already vented her anger that night at the observatory. Moreover, it was impossible for her to make plans for Jing Chen like she did in the past. The friendship of life and death had long been worn away by his repeated betrayals. After listening to Yushu's words, Jing Chen's originally pale face became a little more transparent. The only bit of color was on his lips. He turned his head, subconsciously not wanting to let Yushu see his embarrassment. The use and deception of the sect elders was something that even he couldn't let go of. Now that it was mentioned by Yushu, it made him even more ashamed. It was as if she was blaming him for cutting off the life and death relationship between the two of them because of a selfish lie. Yushu looked at Jing Chen. She could roughly guess what he was thinking in his heart, but she didn't soften her heart. She deliberately brought up this matter to sow discord, to make Jing Chen suspicious of the royal family, so that she could make arrangements in the future. After a moment of silence, Jing Chen said again, "I didn't ask the emperor for confirmation, but you can rest assured that the emperor also told me what the emperor had said. He shouldn't lie to me." Yushu pursed her lips and smiled. Her eyes were so sharp that she could see that Jing Chen was thinking about it. It was time to stop. After thinking about it, she finally asked a question curiously. "You said that the ancient book collected by the royal family, who left it? Could it be Empress Ningxuan?" If it was Empress Ningxuan, it would make sense. This was a very legendary woman, who was said to have become an immortal and a sage by later generations. Maybe the royal family of Da and followed her will. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.